Right, welcome everybody to our first council briefing for 2026 on the 3rd of February. And first up, we have an online presenter, which is Tim Cadigan from the Water Services Authority. Can you hear us okay, Tim?
I certainly can, if you can hear me. I can't really see you. There's a whole lot of tiny figures in the room, but kia ora everybody. I hope you're having a much nicer day up there in Kaipara than we are here in Wellington, which is its usual grey and gloomy self. So, yeah. Do you want me just to fire away? Can you,
Thanks very much, Tim. Yeah, so your presentation's displaying in the room here for us, and I'm not sure who's in control of it. Are we in control of it this end, are we?
Yeah.
But
are you going to run it at that end, Kelly?
Excellent. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so the floor is yours. Thank you, Tim.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Your Worship. Look, just to introduce myself to councillors, I've been 13 years an elected member, but with 8 years being a mayor before coming into this role. So firstly, congratulations to all of you that are in the room. It is going to be an incredibly interesting term. I am anticipating being joined by the Water Services Manager for the North Island, Neil Shaw. I haven't heard that he's not coming, but if he doesn't make it, he'll send his apologies and I'll just box on. So when I became Mayor of Central Otago back in 2016, the Havelock North incident had happened only a couple of months previously, and that was what led to the creation of the Water Services Authority, or Taumata Arawai as we were simply known then. As a result, because we didn't have a dedicated water regulator at that stage. And of course, you'll know from Havelock North, a large number of people got very sick. I still meet people today in this job who are suffering effects from that event 10 years ago. It was implicated in the deaths of some people coming from a council supply. So I've just mentioned Havelock North was 10 years ago. How are we doing now? And if I could have the next slide, please. This is, I just want to give a couple of examples of where we are at the present in New Zealand with our water supply. We're a lot better than we were in 2016, but we've still got a way to go, and that's why the Water Services Authority is here. What you're seeing on your screen is a camping ground in Canterbury, and it has its own supply, so it wasn't on a council supply, and our focus is starting to not shift from council supplies, but while staying on council supplies, bring in a lot of private supplies as well. And there's a reason I'm talking to councillors about this, because it's going to be important for you as well. Now, that camping ground back in September 2025 unfortunately got E. coli in its water supply. E. coli is an indicator species. What it indicates is, putting it bluntly, you've got poo in your drinking water, which nobody's terribly keen on as far as I'm aware. Unfortunately, very unfortunately, the E. coli in this supply was a particularly nasty type of E. coli. We use it, or generally it's used in science as a way of telling when there's fecal matter in the drinking water, because it's easy to find. Generally, it's pretty harmless. You'll have E. coli in your system at the moment. It's a bacterial form that we all need, but it comes in different shapes and sizes. And the one that hit this camp during a school camp in September last year was a particularly nasty one. It led to a large number of children being sick. 6 of them wound up in hospital, and one poor wee tot wound up in hospital for 10 days. And we know how sick we need to be in hospital for 10 days. So these were incredibly unwell people. So that happened in September. Continually in New Zealand, we have monitoring is done of drinking water supplies, and every week we get the reports here at Taumata Arawai of how things are for that week. The last report that we had, which is now for the week before last week, there were 27 E. coli notifications across the country. So that's 27 supplies, including 5 council supplies, that the week ending in the 25th of January had fecal material in the drinking water supply. Now, that was a particularly bad week because there was a lot of weather events. But generally speaking, since I've been doing these presentations to council, I've noted pretty usual to get double-digit figures, and about every second week there is E. coli picked up in a council supply. So I guess if there's one thing I want councillors to take away from this briefing, is that whilst things have improved, we're not out of the woods yet with our drinking water in New Zealand. Most of it is safe most of the time, but not all of it is safe all of the time. So how do we get safe drinking water? I appreciate there's, I think, 4 new councillors in the room. So for some of you, this will be a bit of an overview of stuff you already know, but for others, hopefully it'll be bringing some new knowledge in. So could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. The simple way to do good drinking water is to get the basics in place. So look after your source water. Really good reason for that too is the better your source water and the better you look after it, the cheaper it's going to be for you to treat as a council. Filtration gets rid of a lot of the pathogens. It also clarifies the water, particularly for surface water supplies, so that the disinfection will work. Disinfection comes in two types, chlorination and UV. Chlorination, UV will kill the main pathogens. UV and chlorination only kills some of them. And importantly too is the fourth leg of it. This is secure distribution. If you're having centralized treatment, which most big council supplies are, you need to keep a residue of chlorine in that water as it travels through the pipe network so that any bugs get into the pipes, and we do have a lot of leakage in our pipes in New Zealand, then there's still the chlorine there to kill them. That's the simple way of going about it. Next slide, please. So I was talking about multi-barrier protection in this slide, and the Swiss cheese model I'm sure you're familiar with if something's going to try to get through all of those holes in the Swiss cheese. So I talked about chlorine, and it will deal with bacteria such as the E. coli I've already mentioned. It will deal with viruses such as norovirus, but what it won't deal with is another group of pathogens called protozoas, and these are nasty such as Giardia, Cryptosporidium. You do not want these things. They are particularly bad. So first barrier can be chlorine. Second barrier can be for the other ones that chlorine doesn't get, which is the protozoas, and then also the residual, as I mentioned, in the pipe network. Now, I want to help you out as elected members, having done 13 years of it myself. I would be sure that at some stage you're going to have somebody say to you, the cost of my water is too high, recognising that you are going to a CCO in 18 months' time, but between then and now, the cost of my water is too high. They may even say it to you when you move from being governors to owners. The standards are too high. That's where I'm getting to. The standards are too high. Now, how I used to challenge this, and I think it's an effective way for elected members to do it, is this. I haven't found anyone yet who doesn't think that 0 is the right number for E. coli, for bacteria, for norovirus, for Cryptosporidium, for any bugs. So if they accept that 0 is the right number, that we don't want any of these bugs in our water, then the next question is, well, if our standards are too high, which of these do you want us not to worry about? Is it the bacteria? Is it the protozoa? Because that's essentially all we're doing with insisting on multi-barrier protection, is that we don't have any of these types of pathogens that will make people sick in our water. It's quite an easy proposition to sell when people think that the standards are too high. Next slide, please. So what are we wanting from council supplies? Fully comply with the rules are an acceptable solution. I'll explain what that is shortly. Fully comply with the standards, respond promptly to safety risks with appropriate action. So that's the sort of thing where you have a heavy rainfall, which unfortunately is happening. I know you had a pretty rough time recently in the further up north. That's where you have to put in a boil water notice and so forth to keep the supply safe. Maintain robust risk management plans and demonstrate progress towards resilience. And with council supplies in the pipeline below, what we're looking for is for all suppliers to be resilient to disruptions by 2028. So far less of those boil water notices across council supplies across the country. Next slide, please. So what can you expect from us as a regulator? Look, we're committed to acting in a reasonable manner. The bigger the supply, though, the bigger the risk to people and the more hard we have to come down. So generally speaking, council supplies are in that voluntary space down below where we don't really do much more than monitor. We have minimal interference. We give feedback if issues arise. We provide some guidance. As you move up that chain, though, or up that pyramid, that's where we have to elevate things. We generally don't have to elevate with councils, but what I want to talk to you about, because Kaipara has private supplies, same as the part of Canterbury that had that problem, is this, and it's going to be a little bit close to home, not directly close to home, is you folk are all in that room because you are the eyes and ears of your community. That's how you get elected. I'm quite convinced about that. And you will probably hear as soon as anybody else if you have a private supply starting to run off the rails in your district. And that can be for a number of reasons. It can be financial, it can be capacity issues, it can be growth, it can be succession planning. There's an awful lot of folks running these supplies that look a bit like me. They're getting a bit long in the tooth. When you hear that, can you please encourage those supplies or talk to your staff to let us know? Because when it comes to those private supplies, I know it sounds odd. We're from Wellington and we're here to help. You don't hear that every day. But with those small supplies, we really are, because we recognise that it's not the easiest gig in the world to run a small water supply. And we want to help with guidance, with people offering advice and so forth at the earliest instance that we can with those supplies. Now, there's two reasons I encourage you to do that as councillors. One is that, look, you're community people, so you want your people to be getting good water. And the other is what happens if things really unravel. And when I talked about close to home, unfortunately, the only time we've had to get up to that top part of the scale was nearby to you in Kaio. I'm sure you're familiar, where we regrettably had to step in after having a lot of discussions with the supplier and with the council and say to Far North District Council, you're going to need to take that Kaio supply over. 10 years on a boil water notice and quite a period of time without even water to boil. It became too much. We don't want to do that. And sure as eggs, you or the CCO to follow don't want us to do that, where suddenly you've got to look after a supply that you weren't anticipating looking after. So if I can, another message get across, really encourage you to have people in those positions come and talk to us where we can help. Next slide, please, Kelly. So this is the team that will step in and help. Fine-looking, small but mighty team, and they'll come in and help. Marae, rural and self-supplied schools, kura, mixed-use rural supplies, any of those many little supplies. If they're finding they're having problems, get them to talk to our people. Now, these small supplies, and this is for domestic supplies of 25 people or over, or non-domestic supplies. Non-domestic supplies should be registered and compliant now. As time progresses in 2028, November 2028, all supplies serving over 25 people in a domestic fashion have to be registered and have to be compliant by November 2030. So this team is set up to help those small supplies, of which you'll have a number in Kaipara, move forward. Next slide, please. I'm just going to touch on the drinking quality assurance rules. Your staff will be all over this stuff. This is the rule book, basically, as the name suggests, on centralised supply, how to get good water from A to B, or centralised to the tap. There was a consultation done on this late last year that we're working our way through. Any changes in it are going to be fairly minor. So your staff have got it. I'm not going to worry you anymore with it. Next slide, please. And acceptable solutions I mentioned earlier on, this is an alternate way of treating water. It's very good for small supplies. Some council supplies do operate on acceptable solutions, and you'll be familiar, I'm sure. This is where instead of having centralised treatment where the water is UV treated or chlorinated at the source and then sent down the pipe network, in this case, the water is sent down the pipe network and then treated at each household at the end of the process. It's done with UV treatment and filtration. Look, one message I want to take for you guys to take away from this is that we made really significant changes to the acceptable solutions in September. Prior to that, they were complicated. They led to expensive outcomes. If you're talking to any of the people in your community who are running water supplies or even in their own home saying, oh, look, that stuff's too complex, it's too expensive, could you just ask them to have another look, have a look at our website, or give us a ring if they want to investigate using an acceptable solution, because we've made it a lot easier and a lot cheaper. Next slide, please. Okay. This is really good stuff. I'm a tragic when it comes to water. I get excited talking about wastewater. But this is a big change that came through right at the end of last year. And those councillors who were here previous will probably be familiar that we were looking and now have brought in national wastewater standards. So up until December 19 last year, right across the country, there were different standards. When I was Mayor of Central Otago, I would have been dealing with infrastructure and wastewater for different standards to what you folk were in Kaipara. for a country of 5.5 million. It was a little bit of an odd situation. Coupled with that was about 60% of our wastewater treatment plants are coming up for resource consent renewal very, very soon, and a large number of them are acting now under essentially expired resource consents, some for up to 20 years. So it was a really good time to go, actually, we need to look at this. And what's happened is we've brought in a national standard. This isn't a minimum standard. It's not a maximum standard. It is the standard. So if you are looking at reconsenting or even building a new water treatment plant, this is generally the process that you would follow, which is if you're wanting to discharge to water, you'd look at the type of receiving water body that you're considering discharging into. And there's 9 different receiving bodies from all the way from lakes and estuaries to the open ocean to rivers and so forth. And each of those different types of water bodies has different limits that you have to meet. And if in your resource consent application you reach those limits through the treatment you're going to put in, the regional council, or goodness knows what's to come from there, they can't say, well, actually, we think the limit should be higher. This is the national standard, and it is what will apply. And if consent's given and those standards are used, the consent's going to be for 35 years as well. This is going to make a really big difference to small wastewater treatment plants. I'm a country boy at heart, had a lot of small towns in my area. I can recall, and you've probably done it yourself, you experienced councillors where staff will go, well, we need this much for design and this much for consenting. And I used to say, why can't I buy a wastewater treatment plant out of a box for 10,000 people? And it was because we had all the different rules. We don't have that now. It's going to reduce your costs significantly, and very pleased about that, having been an elected member myself. Next slide, please. Similarly, we do have a discharge to land standard, and it looks at the type of land, the site capability, and so forth. So again, it gives a national standard. If you're going to discharge to land for your wastewater, you know what it is beforehand. You know the standard that you have to meet. And again, it's a 35-year consent if that is granted through that process. And I've got 2 more slides really quickly on this stuff. So next one, please. It's on biosolids. That's the sludge that comes out of your waste treatment plants. The sludge generally goes very expensively to landfill. And actually, it's a pretty good fertilizer. It's like any other fertilizer. So what we've now got is a standard that councils can go, well, if we treat it to this standard, we can use it on our own gardens, or you can even go to that standard and sell it in places, as New Plymouth District Council has been doing for quite a long time. So something to be aware of, and your staff, as always, will be all over this. And just the final one, I'm not even sure why it's there other than completeness. The next slide is talking about the standards that have been passed but won't come into force until 2028. That just for those who were aware that we were bringing these things in, that has been passed, so that there'll be a management of overflow and bypasses standard in about 2.5 years' time. Right, one last slide before we come to questions, because the questions are the really good stuff. These reports are golden, absolutely golden. I loved them when I was a mayor, and I get, as you could probably tell, I'm a nerd. I like them even more now. They tell you how your systems are going. The first 2 tell you that. So the Drinking Water Regulation Report and the Network Environmental Performance Report, they're going to tell you what's happening in your network. It's going to tell you, compared to other networks, how you're going. This stuff is going to be particularly important. Those first 2 come out every year, around the middle of the year. These are going to be particularly important to you as you move to owners as opposed to governors, because it allows you just to have that overview and go, hey, how come we're at this position on this league table when it comes to this particular aspect of our water treatment or our wastewater treatment? They're available. I'll send Kelly the link actually for you guys to be able to look at the ones we have now. And I can say that the ones that will be coming along the middle of this year will be even more sort of league table based than we have now, so you can see where you sit. And the compliance monitoring and enforcement strategy is really the full noise of what I've been talking about through most of this presentation, which is how we're going to do our job and where you fit into that. Righty-ho. Now we can move on to some questions, which I'm looking forward to. Thank you for your attention there. And we've got, I think, about 11 minutes for questions. So please, fire away. I'm in your hands now.
Thank you, Tim. Does anyone have any questions relating to this item? Yep, Councillor Jepson, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your presentation. You just made the statement that sewage sludge makes good fertiliser. Are you aware that in places like Australia, they've had to close the gate on a number of places where they've used contaminated biosolids, and particularly the issue that's I'd like you to talk about is, have we addressed the issue of PFAS in those products?
Yeah, not at this stage. PFAS is an emerging issue, and we are aware of what the concerns you're raising, Craig. They are an emerging issue, and we are very much keeping an eye on where the big overseas thinking is taking us. We're not blind to it, but at this stage, it's not part of it.
Good.
So, Councillor Lambeth.
Yeah, thank you, through the Mayor. A lot of talk, speculation from old-time residents, especially in the Dargaville area, about underground aquifers and how we're not tapping into those. My standard reply to them is that anytime we get water from under the ground, the treatment to get that water back to purity is too expensive to make it viable. Am I on the right track here?
Yes and no. It depends on what the other options are. So if they're getting their water currently from surface water, then your treatment can be quite expensive as well. Are they generally using self-supplied roof water, or what's their option? Where are they getting the water from?
No, through the Dargaville supply from the Waipua River.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
To the treatment plant there. But when we're looking at alternative for water supply to the Dargaville Township, I don't know how many times I got hammered and abused on this, that these old timers said, oh, there's a great big reservoir under the ground here. We just need to tap into here. And I believe that that's where Havelock North had their problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
So
they were
there's
talking about getting from the aquifers under residential areas which had septic tanks.
Oh, yeah, no, I wouldn't advise that. Certainly not.
Okay.
The issue with it is if you get it from a bore, it still needs to be treated because it's still going to go down the pipe network. Whilst it's not guaranteed that all of our bore water, depending on how deep you go, there's no guarantee in New Zealand that it is now pure. The bores can be infected if you wish, which is what happened in Havelock North, or you can have infiltration come through your pipe network, and that's even after there's a long process to make sure that the groundwater is safe.
And there's other things about heavy metals and all that in that. Is that correct?
Yep. So we have what's called MAVs, which are acceptable levels. When I talked about testing for E. coli earlier on, at the same time, tests are regularly done for heavy metals. And you'll find in different parts of the country, particularly around the geothermal areas, you'll get high levels of arsenic. We had that a couple of years ago in the Waikato. They just naturally occur and sometimes get a little bit higher than we want them to.
And mine is directed for human consumption. That's where my concerns are. Not for industrial use or agricultural use from bores, but only for human potable water.
Yeah, we have to treat it.
Yep, thank you.
All right, do we have any other questions? All right, well, thank you very much for your presentation, Tim, and with all of the work we've got going on with our Northland Waters done well, it's very pertinent. So thank you very much for your time.
Thanks very much for your time, Your Worship, and for your councillors. I wish you all the very best with what is going to be a massive term ahead, not just with moving into your shared water services, but all the other interesting things that are going to be coming along. So you have my admiration, and if we can ever be of any help to you, please don't hesitate to pick up the phone. Have a great rest of the meeting.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, we've got our Transportation and Emergency Works update. Thank you, gentlemen. If you would like to seem as relatively new to our council, just reintroduce yourselves so that everyone knows who you are and what your role is. That would be great. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Honorable Mayor and elected members. We are the roading team for Kaipara District Council. My name is Varunesh. I'm the roading manager.
And as you all know me, I think for the new ones, I'm Dion, the contract manager for Downer.
I'm Mark Taylor, I'm the operations manager for that.
And Blair King, I'm an external engineer and the engineer to contract for the maintenance and also the program for your slots.
First of all, Happy New Year. And we had a good first month. Just to give you a quick rundown, we had a rain event in the last week of January. I'm very happy to get this in front of you members that our roads held quite well. Although we got an approval of around $1.5 to $2 million worth of emergency work, but once we assessed our network, our damage was not that bad. And NZTA is quite surprised, and even we are very happy that how Downer, our maintenance contractors, performed on that day. So we have got very less damage during that event. That shows that our network is quite robust and is improving day by day. We had some small issues around some flooding areas, but those flooding happened because of king tide, not because of heavy rain. And few culverts which we installed, they were just over capacity, and we are looking into that, and we'll improve that once we lock in what actual damages are around. These are very small ones. And because I'm discussing emergency work, I'll start this briefing with just to give you an overview of what happened with Cyclone Gabriel recovery slip works. So you can see on the screen, our initial budget was around $16 million. We spent around $7 million. That is 44% of the budget. And we have left with another $8.9 million. That in sites will tell you that we had around 59 approved sites under the leadership of Blair King. We've completed 33%. Under construction is 7. And there are around 19 sites which are under tender or under design process. I have just been informed this morning from our design team that they've already completed all the designs for all the sites. They're all locked in. These remaining sites will be awarded to the panel of the contractors. Those panel was extended for our LCLR works. So that is right now assessed today, as of today, because the last date was 29 January for the EOI for the extension of panel. So that's a quick update. The details will be shared by Blair King in the later part of this briefing. If I move on, this is what we call as our LCLR, low cost, low risk targeted fund budget, which is around 6.7 million. We have spent around $1.2 million worth of work, and we have yet to spend 5.5 million. Yes, that 5.5 million looks a little big of amount, but again, as we extended our EOI for contractors, which will incorporate local contractors to do this targeted fund work, we've got around 16 new applicants who have now shown interest in the region to do these works. These all will be awarded by the second week from today. So total sites were around 15. We have completed 1, under construction 3, and 11 are yet to be awarded. Under this, we have Insley Street. Insley Street is, the design is completed. We are just waiting for the EOI outcome, and it will go to the contractor who bids the lowest for it. There is another site, which is the Harrow Culvert. The slip summary for that culvert has been done and submitted to Wakakotahi. We have increased our initial budget of $334,000 to $450K, which is due to be finished by April 15th. Now I'll move to maintenance and operations, and Dion will walk you through.
All right, good morning, Mayor and Council members. We're reporting for road maintenance services up to the end of December. And Varunesh has asked me to keep it brief, so I'm going to be focusing really on what's important for you council members, and also giving a bit of updates, current updates in between as well. So just starting off with executive summary on the health and safety front, there was nothing serious to report up until December. On our sealed roads, Our seal program for this financial year is progressing really well. We are on track to deliver the 300,000 square meters of resealing for this year. We've also got additional resources coming up from our Waikato sealing teams to assist us to ensure that we do meet those programs. On the rehab fronts, we're happy to report that 2 rehabs have been completed, being Poto Road Rehab and Mangawhai Rehab. We have 2 more starting up within the next 2 weeks. One is Lawrence Valley Road intersection, as well as Te Kawhai. And then there are 3 others being designed for next financial year. So we're getting actually ahead of the game. As far as asset management is concerned, that's ongoing. We're working closely with KDC to come up with next year's forward works program and the years subsequent leading after that. On the unsealed roads, we've started our unsealed strengthening program and progressing well, and that is planned to be complete by the end of May. Slips, we'll leave that up to Blair, will give us an update just now. And on the drainage, it's ongoing, progressing well. And we'll just mention a bit further on, we just can't emphasize the importance of maintaining our drainage as we all put under the test for this severe weather we had. All right, moving on to unsealed maintenance activities. As mentioned earlier, we've started with this year's renewal strengthening program. Just an update, we've just completed Kelly's Bay Road, which received 1,700 cubes of fresh metal. I won't go into detail the rest, pretty self-explanatory. And then on the sealed maintenance, at the end of December, we have completed 25% of this year's reseal program, which is 300,000 squares. We've completed 75,000 squares. As mentioned, progress is going well. We've got additional sealing crews also coming up from Waikato to supplement our existing teams to ensure that we do deliver everything on time. Drainage maintenance, as mentioned earlier, look, there's a number there. We've, in the month of December, we did 3,700 meters of water tabling. There's 64 meters of new culverts, and a number of culvert ends were cleared as well. But just going back on that, being tested through these weather events, one good thing I must say is that it highlights areas where the network needs to improve the resilience. So as a team, we work closely to those areas and ensure that, like old culverts that do not have the capacity to handle these weather events, need to be upgraded. And those are happening as we speak. Slip repairs, I'll leave that for Blair to update us. On the rehab fronts, as mentioned, Mangawhai Road is being completed now. Poto Rehab as well. Lawrence and Valley starting within 2 weeks, as well as Te Kawhai. Victoria Street, the famous Victoria Street. So some good news.
January's gone, eh?
So some good news is that they've identified through all the investigation that there's an old stormwater culvert that for some reason was blocked off with concrete, mass concrete. And this has been blocked for more than 10 years. So it's just flooded itself really under the road. In other words, the whole water level under the road has just been totally saturated over time, and hence pavement failures. So there's a plan now to mitigate that and get a new stormwater culvert laid diagonally across the road and upgrade existing services. So there is a plan now going ahead. Although just keep in mind that that culvert is 6 meters deep.
We knew something was going on down there.
Yeah. So hopefully that's going to go all well. It's going to start up soon, and we'll get cracking on that. And then the other rehabs are being designed for next financial year. They won't go ahead just yet due to budget, but we are getting ahead of the game, getting the designs out of the way. So we have a good start for the new year. All right, just on our network inspections, we continue going across the network, and we just work closely with KDC just to make sure we come up with the best forward risk program, looking at all our faults and prioritizing them. Right, looking at our KPIs, Baroness has asked me just to really focus on the ones that really matter. So on our response times, we're looking good for December. We above our 95%. Monthly complaints versus compliments. We didn't receive any in December, so.
Well, complaints or compliments?
Yeah, both. So it was a short month, and I think everyone had possibly the holiday on their mind, so they weren't really on the button. So.
Run out of complaints by that time of the year.
Yeah. And then local suppliers expenditure, we're still on track with a 30% target spend on local suppliers. And our health and safety front is also looking good on the KPIs with the number of SPCs and CCIs we need to complete monthly. SPCs meaning safety behavioral conversation, and CCIs are critical risk observations. Customer feedback, as mentioned, well, our RFSs were down for December, 109 were received. January will look totally different because of the flood or the storm we had. It really went up. And yeah, so that's really in a nutshell. There's a breakdown of the type of RFSs we're receiving. 35 of those are related to unsealed roads and 24 related to vegetation. Forward programs, I'm not going to go into all detail there, but just as a really high level summary, we're on target to finish all which we are planning to do this financial year. We want to obviously ensure that we spend the budget, and Baroness is working hard behind the scenes to secure more money. Okay, see, hopefully, and yeah. And then just on the financials. So for this financial year, up until the end of December, we spent 13.6 million out of approximately 23 million. And we have our budget meetings every month with contract manager Daniel. We sit down, we look at what we spent, we look at our program we put our program into AWM, which is RAM, and the whole program, you know, with all the estimated amounts, and we're definitely going to achieve our expenditure for the year. We could do with some more. But yeah, that's it from us. Right, so hand over to Blair. Blair, do you want to come take a seat, or do you want to?
Right, if you guys can see me from here.
Yeah.
Right, so if I I'll touch on one key point first, which is Lee was mentioning as the funding issue. One of the challenges we have is that you have significantly more slips on your network, a number of which have never been claimed as in storm damage. So you see the areas, Whakapuria Road's got it's got a number of areas where there are dropouts or failures along there. They were not claimed as part of Cyclone Gabrielle, or they were not claimed as part of the January or anniversary floods, an anniversary. This is a problem for us because as we're going doing these slip repairs, we're finding that right adjacent to it, there's another slip. It's making the designs slightly more challenging because we can just focus on the slip that's funded. There's a specific radii, or if you want to say a slip circle. Yet the issue I'm wanting to raise to council is there is a need almost we can ignore faults at the start of the contract, but it'd be worthwhile actually going and starting to capture a lot more information on these slips, because if they significantly deteriorate, we should be claiming for them. At the moment, there is a challenge that at times NZTA say that slip pre-existed, like pre-existing medical conditions. They don't want to support, but if you can show it with a little slip, and now it's quite a significant underslip, and it's going to be $500,000, those are the sort of things that, in my view, it's financially prudent for council to start that bit of work. So it's just a thought. Right, in terms of, just go back one slide. Please, cool. In terms of, we touched on Hurrah Culvert. So the middle image there is what we call a tensar grid. It's a steel mesh, it's on Arapuru Road. It allows 70-degree slope. Now, if we go 2 images down, next one, and next one, and next one. Oh, it must be in the main report. Yeah, go up there. Right. What we're having a problem with is that when we look at Hurrah Culvert or Tara Road that are touched in your report where the culverts have stirred out, we're having a problem that in these large storm events, the water is heading up and it's effectively saturating the road. And at some stage, the road's acting as a dam. It's never designed as a dam. So once you do that sort of 2, 3, 4 times, at some stage, it's going to go through. And that's why we think Hurrah Culvert has failed. It's an Armco culvert. We did the hydraulic modelling on it, and it showed that basically if we replace like for like, I'm going to get the same issue as what's just happened at Tara Road. It's going to take the road out, and that's a 4-metre embankment on top of the culvert. So we're looking at using that tensar as a front because we can put effectively geofabric in behind it, which holds everything inside. And it's a very similar concept to what we're proposing down Inslee Street, because if the water can get in behind these, the work that we're doing, rock revetments or spalling and that, what happens, it very quickly takes the fines out, the road drops down, and then we end up with a major failure. So I just wanted to touch on that. While we've got a number of slips going on, what we're doing is a little bit what Dion touched on. We're learning as we're going of things that, because we're doing a medium risk approach, that's how we're getting more slips done. And a medium risk approach means at times we're finding that, as put my hand up Tara Road, if we had armoured the road, like put rocks and concrete facings, they're sort of 2 to 3 times the width of the culvert, we probably wouldn't have lost the road over the top of the culvert. But if you end up with the road being saturated because we're getting a 100-year flood, that's effectively what came down through Tara, we're in the situation where we're losing our road, and then we're back to another emergency claim. That makes sense? Okay. One of the things we're also doing, again, a lesson, we're spending more time gaining evidence of actually stages of construction. When I was first brought in, one of the issues that your chief executive was dealing with was an extraordinary claim from one of the contractors, and it was about what they felt was work that they'd done, which the engineers at the time had said is not payable. So there's quite a difference between what was being claimed and what people believed was due and payable. So the advantage of doing tracking progress with the drone, it's actually measuring, but it's a 3D survey. We can actually compare the final claims if we need to get into that dispute. And it just saves, it's almost like another insurance. And it's helping us because as well, we're finding out more little details as we're going through any other issues, and we can track what happens through the storms. Any questions on that?
Who does the drone work?
I've got one of the survey drones, WSP, we're going to get the other one, but at the moment, using one of my ones. There's about $13,000 worth of survey gear, drone survey.
All right, any other questions about any part of this presentation? Councillor Lambeth and then Councillor Jepson.
Sorry. Thank you. Going back to the Gabriel Works program, everything going right, whether everything working well, we would have blown all of that and done it all by December this year, in the next 10 months?
No, not December. Our target date is June 30th. So anything I extend after 30th June 2026, June 30th, the coming June, if I move to July, which is the next financial year, I lose 10% of funding from NZTA. So we are locked in. We will not be extending it any further than that.
Sorry, I thought I saw a graph up there showing it's right through to December 26, but that's
Low cost, low risk is that.
So we're still on that thing of doing the high jobs and doing down to,
The higher subsidy jobs first.
and the rats and mice stuff at the end, yeah. Okay.
Councillor Jepson.
Yeah, with the, trying to ask a question about NRC. I know that, you're working in the marine environment down at Inslee. Are the roles between KDC, our roading people, and NRC, are they clearly established? In other words, down on Inslee Street, how much influence does NRC have on the design, cost of that design?
So they don't have influence on the cost and the design. It is just that they have some concerns which is environmental related. We have already resolved it. I am in constant meeting with Chris Powell, who's the RTC counterpart of mine. And all he has said is that if all consents have been cleared, we are good to go. They don't have influence our design unless they see that something is influencing their seawall.
They have no influence on the Inslee Street design?
Not as of now, because we already showed them a very good design which they approved of. Yeah. They're just waiting. We are just waiting for them to approve all our consents, and we've already submitted it. It's just there.
So what about with other roading around the district? You know, because you're working down close to watercourses and rivers, and so you've got a delineation there between KDC's role and NRC's role.
It's so I give them a regular monthly update on anything which is concerned to them. As of today, they've not raised any questions on any of our projects, but they do monitor our projects for any environmental concerns. But as of today, I'm quite confident that we have not received any.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Tani, then Councillor Canton.
Can I just add to what Ramesh has said? That's the larger slips, we actually had an ecologist go and look at a number of the impacts because, for example, Poto Road, it's affecting a wetland. Cinnapai, we were concerned around proximity towards effectively the Kaikoura Harbour, the fringes and sediment control and that. What Veronish is highlighting is that the relationship with NRC is actually relatively good, but we're having to submit stuff that they can approve first up, as opposed to, I'll say, put something in which may or may not. We're having to, the clarity from Jason, you'll see is make sure we're doing it right first up. Is that fair comment?
Just got a question and going back to the works program for Gabrielle. I heard you mention that once, you know, the contracting works are being sort of identified and the quotes come in, that you would take the lowest quote. Is that standard practice?
So we have different procurement ways we do. Sometimes we go for what we call as low price conforming, but sometimes we do, which is called as supplier quality premium, where we identify quality better than overall price. The whole thing is to get best bang for the money.
Thank you.
Councillor Canton.
When's the Inslee Street upgrade due to happen?
So Inslee Street is right now, we've done what we call as ROI. So we extended our emergency work ROI to also do our LCLR project, which is low cost, low risk, under which this Inslee Street is. Today, as of now, Timothy and Dwayne Gleason, they are evaluating all the EOIs. We've got 16 additional ones. Each one is like 60 pages. So they'll finish their evaluation today, recommend a list of new panel which will do that work, and then we'll send that work to Bing Price to all of them. Once we get the price, we'll allot that for the physical works.
You're probably talking next season.
No. This is due to get to physical works by, I think, end of this February. So, and we intend to finish the work by 1 July 2020.
And just leading on from that, and you'll be probably aware of where my question's going, is that road's no doubt going to end up getting closed, at least partially over a thought during the work, right?
A single lane part. So it's adding on to what Veronish has just said. The work is supposed to start 1 March. What we're dealing with is contractors saying, who can do that? We're asking the all price. If they start, one of the bits we're talking to them, because obviously they've got to work around the tide, but what we're encouraging them to do is most of the work is actually down off the road. It's really only when they come up and trying to knit the new into the pavement that we'll have other than trucks offloading. Because there's a lot of rock falls and a lot of, right. So the question we are talking to the contractor about, how are you going to stage your works to minimise the impact back on the travelling public, as well as keep the NRC happy? So we're doing a design, we're asking them to then refine that design to basically say, maybe do it this way, or we might even do night works and do it this way.
Just if you keep in the back of your mind, the whole Kames Road meeting,
That's
that's where I was driving at, because we blocked that off, they're all going to go there, and it's going to stir up that particular.
On the right side, Kames, I came through there again this morning, and this pre-work for this hill extension on the public transport and KDC is going through.
And then we had a price come back for that, the concrete strip that you want to get in.
No, that's in this ROI, that's the 450,000. So we know the price already.
Yeah, oh, I mean, you haven't decided on who's doing it yet?
Yes.
You have decided.
But that'll be the panel that basically we want the best bid out of the panel.
Thank you.
Take one more question, councillor Nathan.
First and foremost, massive kudos to you team. Can I just say that the total ceiling down at the point was phenomenal. We had the total light dust challenge last Saturday and it was a real good test. So big thank you to you for that. The rehab that was done in total also is done to top notch. So well done team. Thank you for giving clarity to Victoria Street because obviously for ourselves we're getting a lot of inquiries. So can you just give me a little bit more
Yes, I think
around that? Because
maybe
these
we'll
are
just-
full synopsis
Yeah,
happening.
It is quite a lot of technical info and to get down to the real nitty-gritty of the problem, but in a nutshell, it's an old stormwater pipe that was under Victoria Street. For some reason, someone went and just blocked it off with concrete. The outlet, so
I'm just
with
curious.
CCTV footage, so sent a camera down the pipes.
So it's basically just working like a dam underground.
So it's just built up and then it's just flooded back up. Obviously, then it goes to the next chamber, then it flows out, but overall, we've just had saturation, underground saturation.
And usually when we find these kind of things, it sometimes had to, multiple departments of our council has to work.
Yeah.
Water team looked into it, then water team gave us their assessment, and then we did our part. We don't want to seal any of the road if the underlying problem is still there. And what for Victoria Street especially, our counterparts at NHTA have also approved that anything which we do drainage improvements will be paid by them because we found it out under the rehab of our designated program. So we are just working with our water team to get that assets up to date. Once that's done, you'll find the new road coming in.
Yeah, that's fantastic because obviously the flooding, the amount of rain that we had was it's quite a standard thing that our community will need to go through. And there's a assumption that it just happens all the time because that's what happens. But it was getting quite scary there for a while because it was getting quite high in areas, and like people that had parked there, their vehicles, it was right up to the top part of their tyres. So thanks team, that's good to know that you're looking into that.
Thank you. So I've had 3 other people now want to ask questions, so we will go Councillor Rogers, then Councillor Lambeth, then Councillor Williams, and then that's the end. Thank you.
Thank you. Just quickly, when you have an external contractor doing a project, firstly, are they checked off before it's sort of signed off? And if there's any thing not done properly, is there any comeback for that?
So when we tender a contract, we have what we call as non-price attributes and then our price. When we are evaluating non-price attributes, we have set guidelines, what they have to do, minimum requirements to be a contractor in any of our contracts. So we do our due diligence and we make sure that they are up to our standards. If they are not up to our standards, we just simply reject them. They cannot work in our network.
So if we see something that doesn't look like it should be up to the standard, like what?
So there's 2 parts to it. One, when we are pre-evaluating our contractors, and then once they do a job, and we find that they are not under the engineering standards. For example, I'm right now dealing with a pole site. If you actually go and drive, there are some undulation problems which I've identified once the construction was done. So what we have is we do what we call as defects liability period for any construction. So under that stipulated time, they need to come to me. I will not give them a project completion sign off unless I get all those problems resolved, but it's a normal engineering practice.
So if we see a problem,
Yeah.
our process should be to what?
So if you see a problem as a councillor,
Yeah.
all you need to do is
Email
send
you.
me and email me. Yeah, but usually what will happen is if you identified a problem, it is that in background, we've already seen that because it's our projects, we continuously monitoring it, but always welcome anybody who finds a problem.
Thank you.
Mr. Maris, is with regard to process with that, we've got a centralised system for elected members to raise issues. Do you want to speak to
Yeah,
that?
we certainly do, Mr. Mayor. So obviously, I mean, you're encouraged to raise service requests for simple stuff so that, you know, it provides the onus of the conversation onto our staff to contact the ratepayer directly and work that through. If it's more complicated, to stop all these boxes getting overloaded with EM requests, we go through Linda. So it's admin requests as well. And Linda's really good. And she knows the organisation inside and out and get the answers for you fairly quickly or raise the problem with the direct staff directly. So if we could just follow that, that'd be great. Just so that the teams can focus on the actual work they need to do.
The issue you have is that if you go through a centralised process, then we can filter out multiple requests for the same thing. It's just going to one staff member, then they might not know that it's also going through multiple channels, because with ratepayer lobbying, oftentimes you'll get multiple arms on the same thing where they're working with several staff and multiple elected members on the same issue.
Mhm.
That way we can make it more efficient by getting all our ducks in a row together. Yeah. All right, Councillor Lambeth.
Very, very briefly, thank you. Yeah. Back to Victoria Street, all the good work you've been doing, I think we're losing ground there with the public. They say explaining is losing, but I'm just wondering if some PR could be done on this, explaining what the problem is, that you're onto it, because it just saves speculation going up that, you know, yeah.
Yes. There's a strong recommendation I'll put to you as your external engineer to basically sort out the drainage issue. Trying to do a rehab of the pavement that's saturated. I think we're going to have a top end of ditch again. We'll have problems because the whole area is not going to drain away inside 4 weeks. So if they start late, the public will have a very low impression because they know that we will have a low chance. But you've got higher risk of other issues showing up through construction because this is under the maintenance contract. The contractor can claim more variations knowing those risks are actually known. My suggestion would be that we actually hit the defects, the drainage defects early. And if we have a dry period, but we need roughly a month for that period to stabilise before we go in there. Otherwise, we're going to open up more problems, I think.
So with regard to that suggestion, Mr. Maris, is there some way we can have some comms go out around what the situation is there? And get something out onto social media and maybe in the newspaper column? Get that word out there. Okay, Councillor Williams.
It was a pre-question I sent through, just on the recent January storm.
Yes.
So the Tara Road, Brown Road,
Yes.
you had from that, and then there's 3 other sites. It says that you're sending a funding request report to NZTA. Has that been done? And if so, when are we likely to hear back about the funding for those?
So when any emergency event happens, any heavy rain, I am bound by legislation that in 24 hours I have to report the initial report to NZTA. So I've already done that. For that, they have approved $150,000, under which the hydraulic assessment has been already done. Now the second part comes in is what we call as recovery. So in recovery, we basically decide how big is the damage, and then we have to follow certain procurement rules. But that is the second part where NZT asks us 2-page reports on each side. They evaluate what is the extent of damage. But Yeah, and we have done that, all that. It is now with the investment advisor to give us that approval. That approval has 2 stages. Once she approves, it goes to what they call as their commercial manager, which is for the whole region, and he gets every application from every council. This takes time. But because the good thing is that we have an EOI, now we have a set panel to do this work. As soon as we get approval, this will straight away go to the contractors for.
Okay, thanks very much, gentlemen. Next up, we have development levies submission 2026 with Michael Webster. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, okay. I can do it. Awesome. Morena, I'm Michael Webster, policy analyst, working in Catherine Overwater's team and under Michael Day. Essentially, I'll just take the report as read, and the hopefully you've had a chance to have a look through the submission, but I'll take you through a quick look at what we're talking about with regards to development levies, what the key themes and what we've said, and then open up to any questions. I know that I supplied with a question ahead of time, really appreciated that, and I'll be able to feed back to you on that. So what are development levies? They're a proposed replacement for the development contributions, an important funding mechanism for council to enable us to extract money from developers for new infrastructure related to developments, so that it isn't just an ongoing burden for ratepayers to meet. Essentially, development levies are looking at a philosophy of development paying for development. So when a developer comes in, does a task, the development levies are designed to meet the costs of those development, the creation of the infrastructure related to that development. Okay, so development levies are trying to address difficulties with the development contribution system. They weren't terribly flexible, they were complex and perennially under-recovered costs. That's been my experience of working through a review of the development contributions policy, which was finalised late last year. As I said, growth pays for growth, and it's aimed at developers funding infrastructure to meet the demands they create. It still means that if there are direct benefits to ratepayers from a development, so there's sort of a portion that the developer is getting out of it, a portion the ratepayer is getting out of it, the levies are able to be applied to ratepayers to pay their portion of benefit. Okay, has a broader geographic scope, development levy, than a development contribution. It allows for you to aggregate costs, so there might be a range of projects, and you create a levy that is spread across those projects, meaning that you don't have to be so tightly focused on getting your finances exactly right to the penny, and then if you over-recover, you are legally obliged to reimburse, as the current system does. So most councils have taken a risk-averse approach of not wanting to over-recover and then backtrack through mountains of documentation to see who they'd have to reimburse. Councils can adapt plans to respond to growth without full costing, and regulatory oversight is conducted by the Commerce Commission. Oh yeah, they're also looking at a standardised methodology. There is some discussion of that in the draft submission, and I'd point you towards that. Okay, key submission points. Hopefully these are not quite so tiny on your screen as they are on mine. But essentially, I'm saying that we should be supporting the development levy system in principle. It's an improvement on what we've got. It's may not be perfect, but it's definitely heading in the right direction. The key points that I've made are that we don't want anything to add additional burden to ratepayers. The system aims to do that. Hopefully we'll wind up with a system that works a lot better for council. I am requesting that there is an effective education and engagement spurt as part of the introduction of this new system. There can be, having worked for central government and local government, there can be a real thing of once a new set of legislation is promulgated, there's a walk away and see how it evolves. I'm saying, no, we actually need to make sure that's supported, that developers need to know what they're on about, councils need to know what they're on about. So spending some money on education, of course. Councils are going to be essential to the evolution of a high performing system. They've asked some questions about regulation making power. I'm not making much of a comment on that other than to say, look, we just don't have the background information to give you a cogent feedback on that. So, but I am recommending a 5-year transitional period to make sure that we've got plenty of time to work through the various components of what needs to occur to move from development contributions to a development levies led approach. Transitional funding should not take place, should not place additional burdens on ratepayers. Essentially, there was a suggestion that where development levies are instituted, there might be a need for councils to fund shortfalls between contributions and levies for a period of time. And I'm basically saying if we've identified a shortfall, then that should fall to the developer once it's identified. Definition of units of demand should follow standardised methodology, but not necessarily be uniform. We need to base what we're doing on science. What are our draws on the environment? How much water do we use or wastewater do we generate, or traffic movements occur in different situations? So we need to understand what local conditions are. So yes, standardised methodologies, but not necessarily uniform for all of New Zealand. Hopefully that's clear. Yeah, definition of development types requires more work. You need to have a sense of, and you'll see some of this in the draft submission. You can have a retail development, but that could also theoretically, the way it's written from my reading of their discussion document, could encompass things like a unmanned petrol station, not generating any water use per se, but generating hundreds or thousands of traffic movements a day. So you've got to have a really careful definition of what development types are to make sure that they are going to meet your needs. Should be recoverable administration fee for the overheads related to the system, and this should not be funded by ratepayers. Just my thought. And intangible assets should be cost recoverable. By that I mean when you create, say, a 3D model of your city or GIS modelling, all of those become part of your infrastructure. They may not be as tangible as a pipe or a road, but they are nonetheless really important and help reduce costs in the long term. So, government opened consultation the other side of Christmas. I think it was late November, and they're closing it rather quickly. So we need to get this moving, and it means that the submission requires approval under delegation by the Mayor and CE. So what we'd be looking at doing would be bringing the finalised submission as signed to you at the next council meeting.
Oh, thank you very much, Michael. Does anyone have any questions on this item? Rachel, thank you. Councillor Williams.
I just had a pre-question that I sent through.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't.
Yeah, that's okay. Obviously not knowing how quickly this is going to happen. I just wondered, will individual councils be required to go out and consult with?
Through the chair, there will be consultation requirements, and they'll be almost analogous to the existing development contributions, but it'll have its own tone. We'll have to wait, of course, for the final draft of the legislation to know exactly what they are, but they'll be set out there, and it's highly likely that they'll make reference to something like the special consultative procedure. That's
Councillor. Thank you.
Michael, thanks for that. One of the challenges that councils have had, not just ours, is trying to meet this desire to have development pay for development. And so what seems to happen is we fall behind what the actual cost has been, the effect of the actual cost. How is it proposed year on year to adjust the levy according to, your inflationary pressures, etc., rising costs, all that stuff?
Yeah, and there is adjustment mechanisms based for unpaid development levies, looking at interest charges for that to be built in as part of the system. The ability for you to review your costings on a regular basis. I think those would be your key mechanisms. But essentially, currently there is a almost a motivating factor for developers to delay the payment of their development contributions as long as is humanly possible. The new system will try and address that through a system of well, if you haven't paid, there will be potential for you to pay interest payments on what you haven't paid. And if you still haven't paid after a longer period of time, the entire levy can be reviewed. So upwards.
Right. So that brings me to the other question. So the individual costs in your own district development levies, are they going to be set by council or by an external?
That's where it gets kind of interesting. To create a new development levy in some circumstances, you look at the creation of a special purpose vehicle, which becomes responsible for the financial aspects of a development levy. And essentially that vehicle is an entity that you create around an individual project. But nonetheless, if council's got projects that they're looking at, like roading projects and things like that, council would be the entity driving the creation of the SPV.
All right, so process going forward, Mr. Maris, this has got to be in by the 20th of February. If anyone has any ideas that they want post this time, or we've got some cut off for that.
Just checking with Michael on that one. So if you have any further feedback that you'd like to give via email, please direct it to Michael Webster. Yeah, probably by email. What about this Friday?
Yeah, that would be about the latest that usually.
Is a business Friday would be good.
Okay.
It's one any day.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Michael. Next, we have the draft submission on the Natural Environment Bill and the Planning Bill. Thank you, Michael Day.
Morning, members. Let's see, Minister Bishop there with the two bills. The Natural Environment Bill, Planning Bill were introduced to the House and had their first reading 1 week before Christmas on the 16th of December last year. and we'll refer to the Environment Select Committee for submissions. Submissions are due to close on the 13th of February. Together, these two bills are intended to repeal and replace the RMA. The government intends the bills to become law by the middle of this year. So from our perspective, I think there appears to be many positive aspects of the reform package that can be supported from KDC. First and foremost, the new systems architecture that's proposed. They are proposing a whole lot more national direction and to really funnel the national direction down, simplify the planning process, which should reduce plan duplication and shorten planning drafting cycles. That aside, I've identified a bunch of potential issues that I think are worthy of a KDC submission. You'll see that I've put forward a draft submission, and I'll touch on the key points of that shortly. I just need to say that organisations such as Tai Te Wāta will be putting in a robust local government sector submission. I'm envisaging that will be in the realms of 80 to 100 pages. So what I think we need to do is just do a short, sharp, punchy type of submission, which is what you'll see I'll put forward for us here, 4 or 5 pages, really focusing on the potential issues for Kaipara, noting that we are actually in the hearing stage of our proposed district plan right now, and it's integral that we see that process through, because the government is anticipating that the new system will likely switch on circa mid to late 2029, but there'll be a transition period that will commence before that. So it's really important that these new bills provide a clarity for councils about how we can carry on our existing planning processes in the interim. Okay, so just touching on a few of the concerns that I've found is that the new system, as I've touched on, is looking to essentially create one plan per region. So right now, there's over 100 individual planning documents in the country. They're aiming to provide one single plan per region, which, yep, that's got some good points to it. However, I believe that these new plans need to be able to strike local balance and local nuance, and as they state right now, that ability is not there. So I think we need to touch on that. Another key point here is the government's looking to move pretty hard with this new timetable around these new bills. These bills, as you all know, it comes at the same time as wider local government reform. Northern Water's done well. There's a whole lot of reform going on right now. We need to be conscious of that. The central government needs to be reminded at all times about, hey guys, we need resourcing and support here. It's not necessarily always best to charge ahead at pace as well. So we need to recognise that. Another key point, without going into too much detail, is that the proposed bills have outlined that landowners will be able to seek regulatory relief if a specified rule in a plan impacts their use of their land, which, yep, that's quite good, but at the same time, it actually mandatorily states that they get rates relief and other relief mechanisms as well, which could potentially cripple councils. So there's a balance that needs to be struck there as well, and I've touched on that in the submission. And the other key part of the submission is just on the transitional arrangements as well, explicitly allowing appeals to continue under the proposed district plan process that we're in right now, and allow councils to finish their plan development processes as well. What I'm suggesting, team, is that you provide feedback to myself and fellow elected members by end of play this Thursday on the draft submission, and that's because the submissions need to be lodged by the 13th of February, which is just around the corner. There's not much time, which is why I've done a high-level, short, punchy submission. Quite a specific submission as I've touched on, and the submission will come back to the February Council meeting for noting, will be signed off by the Mayor and CEO and a delegation. Happy to take questions. Stage. If any.
No questions. All right, well, thank you very much, Michael, and we'll forward to progressing this one.
Jason, charging you. Here we go. Thank you.
All right, next we have the local government reform submission, which is being led by Jason and Lana.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll take this and we will go from there. I'm going to actually ask you to give me some feedback today as well. So we're not going to get off with just an email, I think, on this one. So you'll recall government proposal for the local government reform was released late last year. I mean, in line with all the other reforms that they've sent through. And we provided the proposal at the December briefing. And you gave us some initial feedback at that briefing as well, some high points that you want to have included. So we took your feedback from the briefing and have included it in a very draft submission and some key points. Now that is an attachment A to the report that you'll see there. Subsequent to the briefing, there are a couple of additional documents that I've included in the agenda for this one. And you would have read both of these as well. One of them was the Northern Action Group proposal from the North Rodney folks to join the Explorer Kaipara North Rodney Unitary Authority piece. I'll talk about that in a bit more detail in a sec. And the second is a think piece document that was authored back in 2016 as well, which is fascinating, actually. It's a fascinating read too. So in fact, some of the recommendations there are very similar to the government proposal, all right? And so what I'm going to do is just take you through sort of the three key points and the three questions that we want to answer. First one, we're going to talk about the draft submission and any feedback that you have, having read it, and we'll walk that through. Secondly, on the Northern Action Group proposal, your views on that. And then thirdly, the think piece and your views on that. And I'll take each one separately and I'll sort of seek your sort of feedback at the time as we walk it through. At the high level, of course, the 20th of February, it's another one of those 20th of February dates. And the next steps, once we finish here, would be to update the submission proper, include the documentation or not, depending on your direction today, and then get that submission signed off under a delegated authority, like we've been talking about the last two items, and have it submitted by the 20th to government. So look, the intent is just to look at attachment A that you have in the report now, and that is our draft submission. And I just want to confirm that it reflects the feedback that you provided at the last briefing as well. And we'll go through heading by heading. I think it's probably the best bet. I think it's really fundamental, right? This is an important reform piece and is going to be, if it continues, the biggest piece of local government reform since 1989, okay? So that's why I'm sort of saying we need to provide some feedback here today so we can get the submission right, because it is fundamental to the form of local government in New Zealand, and it's also fundamental to, ultimately, representation by your communities in the future. So it's an important piece of work here. Now, if we look at page 62 of the agenda, page 1 of attachment A, we're talking about the need for change in local government. And I thought I captured what you said there reasonably well. So just clarifying that you're okay, and if there's any further points there. It's the very sort of high level. if there's no feedback, I'll just keep going through. So if you do have feedback, please stop me. Otherwise I'll just push, okay? Same page, actually. So simplifying regional governance and mayors working together. Do you agree with the replacing regional councillors? Basically supports the CTB and unitary council model. And I've added just a little bit of flesh based on that conversation that we had. Okay. This one was difficult, the like or dislike thing, to be honest, because, dislike's a weird word, but negative. But, I got some key points from our conversation about the like. And then further clarification, I think, rather than the dislike piece. Unless there's actually something that you dislike, you want to tell.
I think it's important to get that further clarification, those points you've got.
All right, I'll keep going. And don't forget, these are specific questions that the government have asked. So that's why we're treating it this way in the table and responding to it with our views, all right? What level of Crown participation in regional decision making do you prefer? And they were the options that the submission provided. In December, you supported the Crown Commissioner non-voting option. So that is very similar in some ways to the local waters, Northern Waters Done Well model. We've got a person who's an expert in the governance space and in the water space that's representing the government, providing that advice to the Community Steering Group, Party Gap. So that I see that would be the same sort of vote. But you're very keen and very clear that non-voting is the preference. Okay, so we'll keep going. The next one is, do you agree that mayors on the CTB should have a proportional vote adjusted for effective representation? So doubly still here, you supported one vote per mayor. However, if that is not agreed, because there's a whole wide range of elected views on this, and they'll get a whole bunch of submissions around all of this. Preferences for the number of votes a mayor gets to reflect the population they represent, that is then adjusted by the local government commission. Now, that sounds like a convoluted process. However, it probably isn't. It is set by the government in the proposal. So they're literally saying, this is the way we're going to go if you don't agree with, if we don't get one vote per mayor through, right?
So just in effect there, the reality of if we go that proportional voting, we'll get one vote for Kaipara, Whangarei will get 3 and Far North will get 3.
It could end up something like that, but we're looking at some logic,
isn't it, with the populations?
Which is why your preference was one vote per mayor.
Yeah.
And there is some sort of I suppose precedence from a regional perspective in that regard, with the Joint Regional Economic Development Committee and the Local Waters Done Well governance piece as well. So there are sort of elements where we've actually been batting above our weight, with the agreement of the other councils in the region as a result. So,
sorry, it does concern me that little old Kaipara is just going to be a tag on to 2 other big areas, and actually will lose a huge amount of political say.
I mean, this is a tough one, right? Because if you don't do one vote per mayor, and then because the alternative, if you do one vote per mayor, then you're going to have Kaipara with a greater representation than, say, population or whatever measure they use, to the detriment of the others, right? So there's a true governance question there. The alternative, which is, if it goes through, would be the local government commission. I suppose the government has tried to set up a mechanism that's reasonably fair, but the mechanism isn't clear, right? So the local government commission will be tasked, and remember, they look at representation and reviews and all that sort of stuff. This is their bread and butter work. They'd be tasked with trying to determine a fair representation system. And so saying in this submission also that the commission should have the flexibility to determine the right balance as well, to reflect local regional conditions. I think we discussed a little concern about the local government commission designing a system that's just a one system that all of councils in New Zealand needs to fit within, without reflection on the local conditions and the local viewpoints and that sort of thing, though. So I think the view here in the submission is that they should have the flexibility to adjust. And perhaps from our perspective, from a Kaipara perspective, we could add in to that piece the information about how we have one vote per, like an equal amount of votes for the Joint Regional Economic Development Committee and the CCO in that space. And we're doing that, and the governance of the CCO for local water is done well, because that adds a little bit more regional flavour to that argument that one vote per mayor.
That's already happening, that's already happening.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when you're with land mass, we're a third, roading, we're a third, productivity, we're a third, with the other two councils, it's just population where we're getting smashed. And really, it's not going to work for us.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll add a little bit more detail to that, but you know, the first sentence is fair. KUC supports one vote per mayor, and that's what you very clearly said last year. So the like or dislike about the voting proposal for the CTB, obviously simple to understand, one vote per mayor is democratic. Dislike, there may be too much uncertainty if the local government commission is unclear on how that effective representation is defined or calculated. And you don't want sort of a black box kind of system that you just plug a number in and something spits out an answer. You want to understand why. It's probably a very hard thing for them to do. Okay, so we're moving along to improving local government. So that is the top of page 64, page 3 of the attachment. So asking to support the proposal to require CTBs to develop regional reorganisation plans, saying yes. And the reason for that is, as you said, local democratic decision-making and self-determination. It's important in that piece. What do you think about the criteria? You did support the listed criteria, but the criteria we did note in December are very high level. So, you know, we were like, you can fit anything under any of those headings if we really want to.
Yeah.
Actually, so you probably need, I think there's more detail and clarity needed to really ensure that clear direction and guidance in that space, because they're just too high level. I'm not going to call them wishy-washy, but they're just too high level. And it doesn't provide that direction really. Okay, moving on. So the Treaty of Waitangi and Māori representation, what do you think about the proposal provides for iwi Māori interests in treaty arrangements? You said you supported the approach, remembering that the approach is, you know, to support the legislative and statutory requirements for treaty settlements in that space. Okay, so that's the bulk. Well, that's the bulk of the questions answered from the government's perspective. There were other aspects we talked about, actually. So I thought it'd be good to flesh out a little bit more in that space around those. And that one was the workload for elected members, or workload of elected members. Okay, and so obviously the mayor's class is full-time under the Remuneration Authority work. There will be significant additional workload with the CTB for the mayor's role specifically. But let's not forget that also that involves district councillors, so you guys as well. And without a regional council, an elected council, their work falls to the district councils collectively. And so the CTB could set up committees that would be akin to what was at the NRC as an example, and populate them with district councils, right? So there will be, and most likely will be, a flow-on effect to workload for the district councils here. So we just want to acknowledge that, but also asking the government to consider that additional workload with the proposal. You think they have, but you never know. So you've got to ask them to consider it. And then that the Remuneration Authority have a re-look at the remuneration because of the additional workload. Well, implementation timeline. So look, it's tight on timeframes. It was light, sorry, on timeframes. We're not very clear about that yet, and no information is coming from central government around those timelines. We can only surmise and guess and try and work it out as well. But of course, with the necessary workload, and you know, there is an old adage in local government, right? So the public do like to criticise councils and all that sort of stuff, and you know, they're going, oh, buddy, council, that sort of stuff. But as soon as there is a risk that the council is going to go, boom, they're massive advocates for your council. Okay, so that is a representation piece, which is really fascinating in local government at world, right? So I suppose my point to that is, you know, that whole representation piece, after they get through the work about what councils do and how they do it, is really important for the community and important for you around the table here, and that takes time as well. Basically, we're just asking the government to provide more detail on implementation timeframes so that it is a measured approach that we can take our community with us on this journey as well. Not, forgetting that it just doesn't apply to KDC. We're talking our neighbours in Northland as well. Right, implementation costs. This Michael alluded to this one in the last submission process as well. Classic government, can I just say, in the best intent, provide reorganisation proposals and reform proposals and that sort of stuff, which has to be funded by our ratepayers. At this stage, we pointed out in the proposal that all this would be funded by the NRC ratepayers, so obviously all ours too. The regional model would pay for it. You know what? This is likely to be quite expensive. And involve quite a lot of time, a lot of staff time, all that sort of carry on as well. So there are going to be significant costs to this. So let's be honest upfront with the government and say, hey, these reforms are happening. We support the reforms, but there's a cost to this. And is it fair that the ratepayer bears all the cost? Okay. So I'm saying that. The other aspect here, and again, Michael alluded to this previously about the reform picture, right? And this is a consistent theme from quite a few councils and Taitawara, who I sit on the board of, is that, the government are moving very quickly with the reform piece and a lot of reform in local government. We just really need to make sure that they're looking at the impacts holistically and making sure that they're all aligned in their reforms and that they are lined up so that there aren't any unforeseen consequences. Or to the previous point, there is an acknowledgement of the additional cost because the RM reforms are hideously expensive as well, and the pressure on our small council budgets too. So that's the recommendation there, is to take a holistic approach, make sure they're all lined up. We're not telling them anything more than that. We're not telling them how to do the job, but we are saying please be holistic in your approach to your reforms and make sure you're all lined up. Okay, so that's question one. I think we're okay. I am relying on you to point out if I stop, so I'm going to keep going. Question two was around the North Rodney Group Unitary Authority proposal. Now, there's a fair bit of detail in that for you, and I'm sure you've read it through. And it has been a significant discussion point ever since 2010 when the Auckland Council was formed, actually, and the group's been aligned in that space for quite a considerable amount of time. But what they're effectively saying is there is a possibility, which could be a unitary authority between, say, North Rodney and the Kaipara, right? At the moment, the reforms are forcing us to look north, because we're obviously got Auckland Council as our boundary neighbour, but not look south at the moment. And that's because Auckland has been explicitly excluded from this proposal and from the legislation. My take on that is once they open that door, it's a mess, actually. So the reasons around that is probably complications and simplicity, try and get on and do the rest of the local government. Auckland's had their turn, we could argue. Now, I mean, to be fair to the group, the NAG proposal, what they're literally asking for is support to have a conversation in the future around that. So let's acknowledge. So they're asking KDC to acknowledge the fact that this could be an option in the future, and that's all we can ask government. That's the most we can ask government for. So I suppose this is where I need your direction. We could attach that proposal to the council submission, and we could simply ask the government to consider the option of us having a conversation with Auckland Council in the North Auckland area at some time in the future. And it may not be as part of these reforms, but it could be subsequent to those reforms as well. But we'll leave that up to government to look through.
If you're going to raise it, now's the time.
Yep.
Whether it can be done or not is by the by, but I think embedding in something else and then trying to reopen it to look at this seems a bit ask about face.
That option.
A lot of mirror.
Yeah.
Yes, there is.
Okay. Where is North
Rodney Stark?
So what is
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
3 of 3.
Basically, you're going to look after the Kaipara Harbour.
Yeah, and that's.
Doesn't make sense.
Oh, I see where you are. Oh, so just
Voice, that's no.
poo away about the tunnel.
Very impressed.
Also looks after tribal boundaries too. Jimmy boundaries? Yeah. What better?
Well, it's sort of encompassing of the whole of the Kaipara.
But also, the other big advantage to it is it'll bring our population up to around about 90,000, which will compete with those other two councils on an equal basis where we won't be bullied.
That's what makes it traditional northern boundaries as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a very clear direction there. What we'll do, yeah, well, I'll raise it in the submission. I'll attach their document to the KDC submission. And we'll work out some wording to ask government to look at that option. Just realising, of course, that they have explicitly excluded Auckland. Okay, so that, you know, you don't ask, you don't get, so you ask.
I believe there's quite a bit of dissatisfaction with a lot of the ratepayers in that area too, being put in the city area. They want to come back to country.
It's been I mean, I was at the Auckland Council when it was formed after that. It's been a topic of conversation in this particular area for a considerable amount of time, ever since 2010, actually. So it's fair, that's exactly fair to say, Deputy Mayor. All right, so I'll raise it, I'll attach it and ask government to look at it in the submission. And the last piece was that local government revitalisation think piece document, which I thought was a fascinating read from my perspective. You know, back in 2016, this was put forward. And if you look at it, there are quite a few similarities to what the government proposal has put in that space, right? I suppose there are a couple of differences too, though. Gotta find my bit of paper. So yeah, the one big difference was, similarity, I suppose, was the removal of the regional council. You know, integrated unitary councils into appropriate regional groupings. And there's a mandatory shared services via CCOs. Now, the government hasn't gone to that level of detail in the proposal because it wants to let local people design the local future through the CTV process. But that could be one of the outcomes, dependent, and that's, you know, through the passage of time in the next couple of years. If it is CCO, then obviously professional governance applies to that. Planning reform, key point 4, that's obviously underway with central government, so that's also occurring. And the role of Māori was around creating Māori advisory forums, that sort of thing, right? So I suppose back in 2016, this was put forward as a think piece. The question I have for you is, do you want to attach this to our submission? And from a KDC perspective, do you just want to provide that to the government for their information? As well, rather than, or do you want to support it and provide it? I think probably provide it for the information is the best option, but that's up to you.
Yeah, I'd support that. Just have it there as an attachment.
And just refer to it and say, hey, provided for your information, additional information, yeah?
Yeah. That
A lot of work that's gone into that document, and some of the people that have completed that and within the Independent Working Party have a lot of mana too in the community, so now I'm talking about Mark Barnes' work in particular.
Yeah. Again, very clear direction. Thank you very much. So look, that really sort of where we're at. We are. Here we go. That's really where we are at as far as the submission goes. So I'll take your feedback from today. I'll amend the submission and include those 2 attachments and what I've discussed as far as context goes. Get that drafted up. I will get that to the Mayor to approve, and then I'll countersign it and subsequently approve that as well. And then we'll get lodged at government by the 20th of February and make sure that KDC submission heads off on its merry way to the government. If by any chance you have any last minute thoughts that you didn't get out today, feel free to email me with them. Otherwise, I'm just going to crack on with the feedback you've given both in December and here today as we've discussed in the direction you provided.
Sorry. Okay, thank you, Mr. Matthew. Sorry.
Sorry, yeah. Look, I would just like to make a recommendation. Given the location in terms of iwi, I think it would be good to have a discussion, perhaps with Te Rūnanga o Ngāti Whātua or also our whānau in the Kaipara around what that could look like with Rodney, but What do you think, councillor?
I think, I may be able to answer, I think that the challenge is it's not just Ngāti Whātua we're talking about here. There's Ngāti Manuhiri, there's Ngāti Wai, there's Te Uri Ohau, so it's quite a large sort of piece of sort of work, so need to consider that.
Well, from a council perspective, it's just a document that another group of ratepayers in the neighbouring district have provided. The government have been very clear that it is not part of their proposal to even consider at this point. So if there are intricacies in terms of other interested groups, if it ever becomes something, then that's probably the appropriate time for that to happen. Otherwise, we're just creating work. We have no time to do that now for something that's not even necessarily accepted by the minister. So.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's kind of important not to get into the detail of what they provided either, because as the Mayor's just said, is for the future, if that is the case for the discussion. It really is at the high level, hey, this has been provided to us, is it an option to look at this kind of thing? Rather than the detail of all that sort of stuff. That will come at a later stage if the government acquiesces. Word there, acquiesce. Yeah, no, fair question.
I've got to ask the question.
Just to set some sort of expectation around how far we get with this, yes, we are making a submission. The mayors and chair and chief executives of Northern met with the minister on Friday, and the turnaround time frame is pretty quick. This is closing on the 20th. We're talking about making sort of decisions or what have you very quickly, aren't they?
I understand that it goes to cabinet fairly soon after submissions close on the 20th, possibly March/April. I don't know the dates. We're moving at pace. I believe my understanding currently, everything can change. Obviously, it's election year, but understand that legislation ultimately, if it is something that the government supports after consultation, could be in place prior to the election, but it won't be enacted until after. But that's all up in the air at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Maris. We'll move on to the project delivery report.
Do you want to take a break for lunch?
Ryan and Kim, thank you.
Bumped up the program before lunch.
Okay, good morning, Your Worship and elected members. Brian and I are pleased to present our update for you on the capital delivery report. We will take the report as read. We'll run through a quick summary, finishing off with some project risks we'd like to take you through, and then finish with questions. So since we last reported, the Mangawhai pensioner housing replacement has been completed. It was a very successful project. It also included the demolition of the existing units, which the local fire brigade were able to use as a training exercise, which is always positive. So there's a couple of photos there. We've had the Taharoa Main Palm Beach new day visitor toilets open, really crucial for the summer season. And going into the specifics, where are we sitting with the program? So across the pipeline in our concept and design phases, we now have 44 projects, representing 40% of the portfolio. The next stage from there is tender and execution. So we're comfortable with that. As you know, the early stages of the year are around the planning and conceptual stages, and this is the time where we want to see the majority of the portfolio moving to those tender and execution phases. Within the tender and execution, we've got 33% of the portfolio showing stable delivery activity, and we've closed out 24 projects to date, with further projects closed out this month and counting each week, which is great. So summary of the completed projects: Aranga Toilet was completed within the available budget. Kaiwaka footpath improvements was completed within the available budget. Manawhai LMR Crescent Car Park upgrade was completed within the available budget. And the Manawhai Wood Street and surrounds revitalisation and similar projects, which represented 3 projects within that program, were all completed within budget. That finished with an amazing Wood Street opening, which was well attended by the community. And we had lots of amazing feedback from the community on the new area and layout. So that was a real highlight for all involved. The Manawhai pensioner housing replacement, as you saw, has been completed within available budget. And the Taharoa Domain, Pine Beach, New Davis and toilets completed within budget. We did want to update council that we are looking to spend the unspent monies within that budget on some urgent upgrades needed at the Taharoa Domain in terms of the shower facilities. So because it's come under budget and it's within scope of that same project purpose, we'll try and get contractors out there as soon as possible to refresh those facilities. In terms of program delivery risks, so staff retention is always a delivery risk for us. Obviously having to hand things over holds up time, and we've got some mitigations around training programs and, you know, trying to attract people to KDC around that. Staff capacity, we speak to you about this regularly. We don't have enough internal project managers to run 109 projects. So we mitigate that by using external project managers to ensure we can deliver the program for you. Active vacancies that we have affecting the program at the moment, we do have one of our project managers in the infrastructure delivery space is vacant. So that's one of our internal project managers. That work has been shifted to external and internal delivery where possible. We also have our second project manager in the infrastructure delivery team on part-time hours. We have a vacancy in the community engagement space, and we also have some capacity in the finance team that usually support the project delivery space as well. So that's just to give you a clear view on that side of things. And now I'm going to hand over to Brian, who's going to take you through our update on the risks that we'd like to share with you.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Mayor, elected members. Good afternoon, good morning, it's before lunch. Yeah, just to highlight again, we've had one of our project managers resign just before Christmas, so he's departed at the end of January. So we are actively recruiting at the moment. So yeah, we're just obviously using our scalable workforce of external PMs to take up the slack there. Rightio, so Dargaville, Wairua, Northern Wairua Memorial Hall, we are proposing to change that project name, just to obviously reflect the recent decision around the demolition of the hall and the annex. So that's now in the green. Obviously the budget is okay. Just a quick update, we are progressing finalising the design for the toilet facilities and progressing the amendments to the consent to allow for the new scope, and obviously confirming the toilet design so we can deliver that under the same contract or demolition and new toilet facilities. Pahi dispersal field, so obviously the toilet was completed some time ago, but the dispersal field is the next project to be completed. So we are currently just confirming the tender response to that. The design's completed. We are proposing to start that towards the end of April after the Easter holidays. Tinapa Wharf, obviously we had a decision towards the end of last year around that. Currently I'm just getting design costs back in, just waiting on another cost to come in. It's looking at about 50% of our available budget. So there's obviously a need to meet the shortfall in relation to the projected build costs, being around $1 million. So design costs will be on top of that. So we'll obviously need to obtain more budget, either from external sources or internal. But that's still a work in progress. Tara Domain, the Pine Beach wastewater treatment plant, so we've obviously delivered the day visitors. The treatment plant is next to the current ablution plot. So the tenders have been confirmed, it's come in well under budget, and we're proposing again to start their work just after the Easter holiday, so the 20th of April is the proposed start date there. So that's going to be good progress there. Mangawhai Circular car park improvements. We do have a little bit of a concern over the budget there. While we haven't yet tendered that, once we have a tender response, we'll be able to confirm whether that budget's sufficient or not. But we're just highlighting that as a potential risk around budget, because at the moment our projected costs don't include contingency, and yeah, we believe we'll need a little bit more funding there. We'll keep you updated on that one. Well, the district-wide enterprise resource planner, it's out of our delivery scope, but sure we need to comment on that. But
yeah, I think there'll be an update.
Yeah. Sorry, that's a project outside of project delivery.
Yeah.
That's a quick update. So available for questions.
Thanks very much, Brian and Kim. Just on that Mangawhai car park improvements, following on from the concept plan consultation hearings, the key takeaways that I remember from that were that we were going to push on with doing the picnic bay improvements, and we wanted to deal with some of the noxious weeds up there. I know that we had in that concept plan future car park reconfiguration, but I don't since then remember that being something that was given the go-ahead. It appears it's become a material project, and maybe I've missed something. Is that a body of work that's taken on a life of its own, or
A project?
No, the car park improvements.
Yeah, there is a specific scope to extend the car park and increase the capacity there.
I'm aware of that. It was part of the concept plan.
Yes.
I don't remember that actually becoming a program of work that we were actually doing.
So through you, Your Worship, I believe that 800,000 was approved by the annual plan for those works, and that is which was approved by council, and that is what staff have acted on as that approval.
Right.
That's my understanding.
Probably the first that we've heard. I did see it somewhere in the
It was published
newspaper or something, and I went, oh, I didn't know we were going ahead with that. Now.
It was published in the annual plan as a planned capital project.
Right, okay. So what is the time frame for that then in the annual plan?
So through the chair, we're just confirming the detailed design at the moment. So we're nearly completed. We're just adding a bit more stormwater management. Recent weather we've had, was a bit of issues on the picnic bay side of that car park. So we just need to make sure we've got that stormwater catchment right off.
And I think what the elected members would particularly like to see before you actually push go on tendering any of this is what you're actually proposing, because we were heavily involved in that concept plan, and there might be some local knowledge considerations that it's not just heading off in a direction without having any look at it at all.
Yeah, through the chair, if I can just add to that. So there's two separate pieces here. There's the wider Mangawhai Heads concept plan, and then there's the car park improvements. So historically, over the last 3-4 years, we've had a lot of problems with the Mangawhai Heads car park just being over capacity. People getting blocked in, or the bus can't get in, or the emergency services can't get in. What the car park improvements is just a short-term solution or a medium-term solution, bridging solution, before we complete the full Mangawhai Heads concept. And that is to create more parking and better flow of traffic in and out of that space. So it's just to relieve some of the public concerns and complaints that we've just been receiving for the last 3-4 years.
Is that not going to possibly end up in a rework?
No, they'll work hand in hand. So it's creating more parking, more ability for the emergency services and the bus and to create better traffic flow. Relocating the disabled parks closer to access points across the car park, things like that.
So the layout is going to be part of what might happen if the concept plan is in effect to.
Each other, yeah.
Because from a concept plan perspective, I thought that's what it was. It was just a concept plan. It wasn't a plan to actually implement.
Yeah, correct, but these are just car park improvements to make over the summer period, our have more capacity, flow the traffic a lot easier and to give disabled emergency services in the summer bus better access.
Okay, thanks for that. And just on the budgets for each of the projects that are listed, I know I've asked, I think more than once before, if we could please have the sources of that revenue detailed for us. So if we can have that as a takeaway for the next report, if we can actually, we know what the budgets are and we know what those sources of revenue are, whether they're general rate, development contributions or external funding, etc. If we can have a column for each of those types of revenue source along with each of these things that can then be totaled into the total on the summary page or by area, it gives some idea of how that is comprised. We can have that as an action point to take away for the next report, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So yeah, you have asked for that numerous times now. We are very aware of that as well. We just are very resource light in finance at the moment. We're having some significant issues there as far as resourcing goes. So we are aware of the need to do that. We will be trying our best to do so, but we've got some resource problems right now.
Councillor Canton.
That's passed, but I did have a question on the Tinapai Wharf renewal. Thank you, Your Worship. Are you getting designs done at this stage?
Through the chair, we're just getting high-level estimates on design costs. Yeah, that's all.
Have you sort of dealt with the locals a little bit about whether we're just exact like for like what's there now, or it's just a little bit more to suit them with the benefit of hindsight? And have you considered the existing wave break that's already there and whether that can be reinstated prior to the war?
To the chair, basically only just focus on getting the costs in, which has been pretty difficult between December and now.
Yeah.
For some reason, people stay coming back from holidays. So of the three I've approached, I've received 2 back in. But the feedback from the locals is basically, as per the meeting in December, was pretty much they want a like for like possible. So we will obviously engage with the local community more once the designer is confirmed, and then we can get that input and obviously integrate that into the design.
Are you aware that we stood up a sort of a makeshift working group around the Tinapai Wharf last year?
I was aware that was going to happen, but I'm not sure who those
did happen, and they've been out there and met locals. Councillors Szymanski, Canton, Rogers and Jepson. And I had a conversation the other day about our projects, and it seemed that that was possibly lost in the mix, and I was going to inquire because they also have local knowledge and input, and there might be a hybrid solution that actually the locals do want. I don't know where those conversations went to, but we probably need to pull those councillors into the mix with what you're doing, because the feedback I got the other day was, no, everyone just wants a like-for-like replacement. But I think the conversation has already gone beyond that. In that working group, who was actually leading, who did we have leading that working group? Did anyone sort of take a lead on that, or?
We had through the chair, we had a meeting out there, and Denise, myself, and Mike Szymanski met with the locals, and it was, they were talking amongst themselves between the interested parties. For example, the Coast Guard and the community. The feeling, well, not the feeling, the feedback that I received from was the fact that, they're quite passionate about the fact that they'd originally built that facility themselves, like the council. And I understood they were going to go and use a local engineer to do some of their own designs. I'm a little bit perplexed that we're doing that ourselves now.
Well, can we just have after this briefing, if you can just convene a conversation between yourselves, Brian and Kim, and the working group somehow, just to make sure we got our ducks in a row before we push on with funding design, when they might actually have other solutions that might still be in the mix. I just don't know, but make sure.
Yeah, I have approached the designer who the community was proposing to use. I've had no response from about 3 emails. He's the one person I'm still
tried to correspond with. So.
Yeah, with the I can't remember the chap's name, but so like I said, I've just high level estimates on the design costs. We haven't locked anything in. It's just purely just an email approach, so it's not a formal tender in any way.
Okay, all right. If we can connect the dots there after this, that'd be great. Yeah, just.
Through you, Your Worship, we've also been keeping in touch with the community group. We did work with them after our initial meeting held out at Tinapai, and said it would be really nice if they could get a collective community review to present back to council in terms of what they're wanting out there. And I believe that's what they presented in December, but they're also very active in trying to look at some external funding to support the project, which I think is really positive. And internally, we've been looking at any opportunities that we can access to support that external funding avenue as well, and exploring that to see if we can come up with anything to support the project.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions on this report before we break for lunch? Yep, Councillor Nathan.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to check in with the Dargaville Northern Wirral Memorial Hall. Just wondering if you've got any dates there for the demolition. Or obviously, I'd like to sort of be in and around when that happening there.
Through the chair, we're still confirming that date because we have to get the plans finalised and updated before we can tender it. But in reality, it's at the earliest, probably middle of the year.
All right, well, thank you very much. And we will stop for lunch now. We'll come back at 12:40. Thanks, everyone. Welcome back, everybody. Next up, we have project update for Mangawhai Open Spaces Strategy and the Alamar Crescent Master Plan. To Melissa and Andrew. Oh, Melissa.
William Haley.
Yep.
I haven't changed.
All right. It's yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Melissa Parling. I'm the Manager of Asset Management, and I'll be presenting on the Mangawhai Open Spaces Strategy and the Alamar Crescent Reserves Master Plan. So our newly elected council members have requested further information to be fully briefed on how to time and structure the community consultation, as well as what the proposed strategy and master plan aim to deliver. So that's what brings us here today. The project kicked off in September, just prior to the October elections. So considering this, we've paused the consultation to allow our elected members to receive this information and provide some direction on the way forward. Thanks for your time today. I'll take the report as read and run you through a quick presentation. Okay, yep. Right, very brief agenda, overview of the project, proposed new timeline, and some next steps. Right, so the project is in two pieces, the Mangawhai Open Spaces Strategy and the Alamar Crescent Master Plan. Now, the delivery of these two pieces were aligned to make best use of both council resources and our stakeholders' time and energy during the engagement and consultation processes. The Mangawhai Open Spaces Strategy will be a framework to guide the long-term planning, development, and management of parks across Mangawhai. It will address recreational, environmental, and community needs in the context of rapid population growth. The Alamar Crescent Reserves Master Plan is a coordinated design and long-term implementation plan for the estuary reserves around Alamar Crescent. This will ensure the spaces function cohesively as a key waterfront destination and reflects the community aspirations for years to come. Now, why have an open space strategy? It's about proactively planning for growth and changing demographics. So Kaikoura is attracting more young families and turning holiday homes into permanent housing. However, there remains a distinct lack of facilities provisioning for young people. Similarly, with an aging population, we need to provide fit-for-purpose reserves, providing active transport modes as well as thoughtful parking. So this strategy would help operational staff with negotiations and discussions with developers, leading with council's needs rather than arguing through hearings opposing what developers want. So we need to coordinate investment in Mangawhai, where we're seeing private plan changes followed by large and small scale subdivision. We need a strategic approach to how we develop land, what land we accept and for what purposes, versus what financial contributions we can accept in lieu of land, reserve land, and how we spend that money in Mangawhai. We need to make sure we make the most of what we have. Mangawhai doesn't have a lot of flat land, and the existing flat land can be wet or poorly draining. Local sports clubs are telling us they're having to cancel events or leave the district to play in winter competitions. Stakeholder engagement, together real-time growth figures and local trends, enable evidence and need-based decision-making really specific to Mangawhai. An open space strategy will inform other plans. So the strategy will support the operations team in future planning and project prioritization in the LTP. Having an open space strategy will make the most of our existing open space and defends our ability to acquire land to make more great public spaces. The open spaces strategy will sit alongside other key council documents to ensure the people of Mangawhai can continue to enjoy the incredible quality of life offered here. So the strategy will apply to a geographical area aligned with the Stats NZ areas or the SA2 areas. These are called Mangawhai Village, Mangawhai Heads, and Mangawhai Rural. They cover a large area being the district boundary to the south, west to Pritchard Road. The boundary then heads north just east of Hakaru, And then the Brown Road kind of Prebblebrook area in the northwestern corner, and then out to the coast again near Tuaraki Road. On this map, you can see some of our key reserves marked with numbers and some other reserve areas in yellow, including Esplanade reserves. So the project will deliver a key operational strategic documents guiding development for the next 10 to 20 years. Pre-engagement work included reaching out to key stakeholders such as sports clubs and other active recreation organizations operating in the area. Any groups that missed with pre-engagement, we'd hope would be caught up in the public engagement through online surveys. So groups we've directly contacted so far related to the strategy include the Mangawhai Domain Society, Mangawhai Museum, Mangawhai Golf Club, Fire and Emergency, the Mangawhai Harbour Restoration Society, Mangawhai Football, Mangawhai Netball, Kaipara Basketball, and more. So now moving on to the master plan. Why do we need a master plan? It sets a high-level direction that council can use as a Southern Cross to make decisions around the use of reserve land around Alamar Crescent. For example, the Mangawhai Holiday Park have indicated a willingness to discuss land reallocation to enable different land use or activities on land currently leased by the campground. We also know that the roading team have a budget of $600,000 in the LTP for Alamar Crescent and Olsen Ave area-wide upgrades. Council agreed at the time that direction was required on what work would take place through this project and that further investigation was needed. So we've all heard about boat and beach users complaining of parking and traffic issues in the reserve areas. The reserves need to be functional and designed with the users and the environment in mind. We want to hear what people think that looks like. Mangawhai is experiencing rapid development. This premium coastal reserve is a real draw card for people moving to the area. The estuary reserve is treasured by locals and commonly used for dog walking, swimming, and boat launching. We need to protect and enhance these beautiful coastal reserves, and a master plan can help do that. So drawing a line around the master plan scope wasn't as simple as the open spaces strategy, but the area outlined in the picture is all council-owned or managed land. Extending the master plan area to Wood Street meant we could incorporate connection to Wood Street, but expanding it further south, which is actually on the right-hand side of the picture, sorry, there's no compass, isn't out of the picture. And we can adjust based on feedback from you and from public engagement. So key facilities and landmarks are noted on this picture to help orientate you with the area in question. And pre-engagement for the master plan included contacting groups such as the Coast Guard, the Mangawhai Boating and Fishing Club, Mangawhai Sailing Club, Te Uri Hau, Rotary Learn to Sail Project, Mangawhai Heads Holiday Park, and Mangawhai Harbour Restoration Society again. So the project approach is deliberately designed to ensure a strong focus on key stakeholder engagement and community engagement. We want to know that the community's needs are reflected. So early engagement is informal and intentionally exploratory, beginning with a bit of a blank canvas to understand how stakeholders use the reserve and public open spaces, what they value, what challenges they experience, and what improvements they would like to see. So this is the initial project timeline. Public engagement was timed to align with high interaction with public spaces and reserves. We also want to target a time when we get a good mixture of permanent population, holiday homeowners, and visitors to the area. So late January and February would be used to draft the documents and familiarize council with them before approval to consult in early March, and then public consultation and redrafting and endorsement by council in late April. Now we've stopped a couple of days into the public engagement phase in phase 2. And we want to restart the project public engagement and leave it open for a minimum of 2 weeks. So we're proposing a new timeline in red. So we'd like to restart the public engagement to inform the draft strategy and master plan and bring that to a council meeting in May or June. And then pending council approval, there'd be a formal round of public consultation in 2026, where we'd be looking for feedback on the draft plan and strategy. This follows standard process and is common approach for KDC. We've been using it for a few years now. So the public engagement could be aligned to meet with the Easter weekend and the school holidays to incorporate feedback from non-permanent residents, and a new completion date is projected for September. Finally, the next steps are outlined on this sheet. It's basically just the timeline in another format. By completing the Mangawhai Open Spaces Strategy and the Alamar Crescent Reserves Master Plan, will equip council operations with the clarity and evidence and community mandate needed to make confident, future-proof decisions about some of Mangawhai's most valued public spaces. So thank you, and we're happy to take questions.
Right. So the first I ever heard either of these programs of work were happening was when we had our council induction session, and they were part of a very brief part of that conversation that these works were going on. I've subsequently heard that they're in the long-term plan apparently, but I couldn't find them. So are they in the long-term plan or?
So I can tell you that the master plan for the Alamar Crescent has $100,000 in OPEX in the annual plan 25-26 that we're currently in this year. That was approved at the council meeting on the 28th of May 2025 after elected members requested it in the March council meeting with finance. So GC was leading that session.
Where is that in the long-term plan? Where's the budget line? Sorry?
So it's in the annual plan 2025.
Yeah.
That was post direction from elected members in March council meeting 2025. So it was requested in the annual plan, I guess, additions by elected members to be added in there. That came off the back of the $600,000 line item that's in the long-term plan from the roading team. There was discussion around what that Olsen Ave, Alamar Crescent improvements, $600,000 would pay for. And it was directed by elected members that we needed to do further investigation to understand how that would impact the leaseholder at the campground and how that would impact residents or users of that reserve.
And the
Space strategy, so that's operational. So I asked for that document to be created. So we need some guidance around what to provision for Earlitch Park. We also need some guidance around how we speak to not elected members, developers, and we really need to be on top of the growth that's happening in Mangawhai. So we've often had feedback from elected members over the past 3 or 4 years about the need for an urban design or urban plan to reflect our reserves and how we're provisioning them. So, yeah, that's within my DFA to be able to direct and request.
So, it is a council policy nevertheless, isn't it?
No, not correct. We're creating a strategy, not a policy. So it'll be a guiding document. It's not a policy that we're bound to provide guidance and supports operational staff.
Well, it's neither a policy nor a plan in your opinion.
Correct. The master plan for Alamar Crescent would be a formally adopted plan that council would need to approve. The open space strategy is a high level strategy and approach for operations staff.
What's the budget for that?
So we took $50,000 out of the Earlitch Park CapEx project and transferred it to OPEX.
And how did that happen without any discussion?
Well, we have that within our delegated financial authority as elected as executive team members. We did that through what we call the portfolio oversight group. So it's our project governance group. The executive team meets with subject matter experts. We identify how we can support projects, and we identified for Earlitch Park. One of the drivers there is understanding which sports grounds we're provisioning and what we're supporting to be able to deliver there. And we have no supporting information for that. So we agreed as an executive team through that POG session, and it was minuted that we would transfer $50,000 of that project to OPEX so that we could develop an open space strategy.
And so the budget for Alamar for Earlitch Park was $200,000, was it?
Yeah, 254.
And so what's happened with that work that we've been asking for a long time to have that?
I think.
Just let me finish if you don't mind. For Earlidge Park, we've been asking for a long time to have a feasibility study done on converting that land into sports fields.
Yeah, and it's in this year's annual plan, and I think it comes from March briefing.
So I can just leave in there, that work's still ongoing. From an executive perspective, we had a look at it about a week and a half ago. We wanted extra work to be done before we brought it in front of council. It was scheduled for this briefing, however, it didn't make it. It will come to the March briefing as well. We just wanted some extra work done in that space before we put it in front of council.
So when you launched Mr. Maris into this open spaces strategy, did you talk to the previous mayor or the current mayor about doing that work, a open spaces strategy for the whole of Mangawhai, or did you also consider it to be entirely an operational matter that we didn't need to
it was done through the internal structures that we have from a project perspective, Mr. Mayor. We are bringing that to you now after your feedback. I think from a professional perspective, it makes a lot of sense to do this work and get this done. However, you know, you guys were surprised and somewhat possibly due to the election as well, and our need and desire to get on with the work here too. There were a lot of interactions, as Hayley said, with our previous elected members, with various site meetings, various meetings with them individually and collectively together, to really focus on urban design and focus on Mangawhai to make sure that we can plan properly for growth and make sure that the open spaces we have are utilised as best as possible, but also that we plan for the future growth and have future open spaces available. So it is simply a way of trying to make sure we holistically look at that area in Mangawhai, which is our largest growth node, obviously, to make sure we do have enough open space and make sure the open space that we have, we manage appropriately and properly.
From my recollection, there were three components to the conversations and direction that were given in the previous term. The first one was we wanted to do a feasibility analysis of turning the Earlidge Park land into sports fields. I don't really know why that still hasn't happened. It's been going on for a very long period of time. The second thing was there's a possibility of a development agreement with Mangawhai Central, and we didn't know how much land or what land might be needed for that type of development. And so we wanted to do some analysis on that. And the third component was various conversations were had about Alamar Crescent and traffic and parking and how that might all work. But that seems to me like this then took on a life of its own and became two very large programs of work, which I had never heard of until we came into our induction this term, and I would have expected that we would have heard about it. I would like to hear from the other elected members that were on the council last term about, am I wrong? Have we heard about this before? You were the ex-mayor, Councillor Jepson. Were you briefed on the open strategy or what?
I was aware of it was because I'm the patron of the sailing club. They came to me and said they'd been consulted with over it. And I thought, well, what have you been consulted on? So I had no awareness of it. I mean, when was East engaged and what was their brief? You know, surely we would have been entitled to have an overview of the brief before the work started for a start, you know, and there's all this work that goes on in the background that we never get to hear about until it's placed in front of us. Okay, we want you to pass this off, you know, but there's a process we're not going through here, and that is consulting the elected members.
So,
I mean, the brief itself should have been put before us before it went out to any sort of tender or expressions of interest for people like Zeiss to be involved. You know, it's like when you go down to the foreshore, you were seeing placemaker boards being put up and pissing people off that don't want it on their little bit of foreshore. And you go, well, how's that happening? You know, is that part of this, or is it just people doing what they want to do without consulting their elected members? I mean, I'm pretty pissed off about it, to be honest, because what you haven't got on that timeline is when did you actually engage Zeiss?
Yep, so through the chair, at the August meeting, August briefing, when we were over in, I think, Matakoi, and we had one of our developers present to us, it was requested by elected members for us to provide an update on the procurement of this urban plan work. And so at the beginning of September, I emailed all mayor and elected members that we had gone through the procurement process and that we had engaged Exist and that work was due to kick off. Per the procurement policy, because of the low operational dollar amount, that does not need to go through council. So we followed the full procurement process.
Mr. Mayor, maybe the right approach here now is to go, you know what, it's you've paused the program, and that was done at your request late last year because of the angst around this from an elected member perspective. However, what we agreed to bring this to you. You've now seen the program in its entirety and the reasons behind it. There were quite a few conversations, like I see, with elected members in the past around this work and the need to be holistic in our management of Mangawhai, which is the right thing to do. But we are very happy to take your feedback now about how you want us to work forward here and see what you want done post where we are now. So very happy to have that conversation.
I mean, why would you ask for public engagement on the 15th of December and the 11th of January to engage on a document we've never seen?
I get your point. We're accepting that point, Councillor Jepson. Fine, I get your point. We can't go back in time. What we're trying to get is your feedback about how we go forward.
Well, I think the point that's been raised by Hayley is she says it's entirely an operational matter and she's not required to talk to us about it before she goes out to the public. And I think we need to sort that out because under Section 41 capital A of the Local Government Act, under the mayoral powers, the mayor leads all plans, policies and budget development for consideration by the local authority. If you don't even know something's happening, how can you lead it? And we're told, well, that's a strategy, it's not a policy or a plan. Well, I think I'll beg to differ on that as well. A major strategy that encompasses all of the reserve land of a rapidly developing town is not only an operational matter, it has to have government's oversight. We have to know about it. We need to be able to justify the expenditure to our ratepayers and have an input into how that's delivered.
Through the chair, I don't disagree with that at all. All we're doing at the moment is completing pre-engagement to form draft documentation that we're bringing back to council for endorsement or approval and public consultation for endorsement or approval. So the draft documentation and a formal consultation with the public all comes back to council to approve. All we've completed at this moment is pre-engagement to form a draft that we will present to council. And that just gives us that full lens. So it's the same as what we did with Tinapai Wharf. We went and met with the Tinapai community, understood their point of view before we came to council and presented that formal paper. So it's that standard pre-engagement approach, informal, very high level, creating a blank page so that we can, when we provide a draft, we can have confidence from the elected members that this does have a high level community input and we're going in the direction that the community wants us to go in. And then we would give you the opportunity to feedback, make changes, approve a consultation approach. We would provide that draft approved document from council to the community for formal engagement, formal feedback. We would make changes and provide that formal document. So this is the very, very early stages of this.
Where's the brief that you gave us in the first place? Did we get to see that?
Did I send the document?
Yeah, what did we ask them to do? Surely we would have been entitled to look at that before we went out to consult them for a major piece of work.
So through the chair, in the email that I sent out to all mayor and elected members in September 2025, that provided detail around what we were asking Exist to do. Yeah, and as I've said, I received repeated requests from the previous council around urban development and the need for an urban plan for Mangawhai to manage the growth. We don't just have Mangawhai Central that we're working with, we're also working with Mangawhai Hills and many subdivision developments as well that we need to be able to have some kind of basis operationally for staff to drive from.
Okay, so the feedback and the action point, I agree with Mr. Maris. What's happened so far can't be rewound, but for this project and going forward, we need to actually have some ownership over the project happening before it starts happening. So we're going to have a major planning project, and Hayley's now agreed with me that it is, well, I think she said she agreed, but she now agrees that it is actually a plan or a policy or a strategy falls within the gambit of that as a high-level document. We actually need to say, yes, we had a number of things that we wanted addressed, and I'm not saying that what you've come up with in terms of these two programs of work isn't necessary or a good idea, but we didn't actually go, let's do them. And we need to actually do that first and then inform how that's going to happen, including the pre-engagement. It's not possible to lead something if you're not involved in it from the start. So for this project, we can reset this. We've started that process. Let's get it sorted in terms of exactly how we're approaching it. In terms of future projects, the action point is that elected members need to be involved from the start, and we need to say, yes, we want to do that, and then have input into how we're going to do it. Otherwise, we end up with this situation where we're finding out after the public have been consulted on things and we didn't even know it was happening.
Okay, point taken, Mr. Mayor. Now, are you prepared to provide us some feedback and direction moving forward for these two projects?
I don't know that we can actually do that on the hop. There's an enormous amount of work that's already gone ahead. I'm happy for people to have feedback now, but I actually need to have a proper sit-down session on this and understand what's already happened. Let's start by going back to where it began and what brief was given to Zeist when they were engaged. So we know what's been asked of them. That would be a good starting point.
I'd be interested to see that brief.
Yeah. So we'll bring it back to another briefing. So we'll just.
For a briefing or just a meeting?
No, I think just distribute it.
Right.
Let's get started by getting the facts of the matter, how this came to be, because it appears that in September stuff happened, an email was sent, was probably in the final throes of a local body election, I imagine. And there effectively were in an interregnum period almost, were we?
Well, I think it's a combination of that, Mr. Mayor, but, you know, I mean, as Hayley pointed out, we've had significant feedback from individual elected members and meetings down in those areas over probably 18 months to 2 years that we were reflecting, and we were simply trying to get on with it, as a matter of fact. Urban design is a thing that was always provided feedback for, and that email concluded that process by saying we have now appointed an urban design professional urban design unit to us, so we could actually get on with that work. And this is the combination of that. So look, it is what it is. We are where we are. We did it with the best intentions, as a matter of fact, because I think that's a fair point to raise here. We wanted to get that work done. We wanted to make sure we're planning properly for Mangawhai and the growth. I accept that there was a little step there where elected members weren't aware, and that's most likely because of the interregnum period and the fact that the elections came and went. And also expect and respect the fact that we've got a new council now who may have slightly different views or the same views, we don't know. We need to take them on that journey. So what we'll do is we'll get the brief out that we provided to exist, so that you're aware of what we started, and we'll start the process again so that you're comfortable. But let's just don't lose sight of the fact that this was done with the best intentions for the benefit of Mangawhai and for the benefit of council to ensure we get the best facilities and the best open space that we have and can adjust for the people in this community. And that was the whole intent of it.
Just a comment from me, Your Worship. I think that you know, having a timeline of, you know, going back to, you know, the start of this, so we can identify where there was gaps where elected members weren't given information on this. I think that's really key. And I take your point, Jason, in regards to you know, wanting to move forward. But as an new elected member, I think there's a risk profile here that we need to understand. That, you know, we could be in front of our constituents trying to understand information that's gone out before us. So I think we need to understand that and, try and lower that risk.
Councillor Williams.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is, so you mentioned that you've already engaged with, we've had feedback from some community groups. From my perspective, I think it would be interesting to know what was asked of them, because what concerns me is we might set up some expectations with our community and community groups for things, they might think would be, I don't know, definitely happening, or that it's in the mix. I just think we just need to understand what was asked of them to respond to.
Yeah.
Because not knowing that, and then if we get a club or something come to us and talk to us about it, we don't have any kind of scope or background on what.
Yeah, we can provide that too. But just to reassure you, we did make them aware that this was pre-engagement, forming a draft proposal that we'd be bringing to council. So we were just pre-gathering that information, and it was very high level, like, what do you currently use the reserve for? What would you like to use the reserve for? Very, very high level.
Councillor Cantwell.
Mr. Chair, on the whole, I'm not opposed to a grand plan. I think it's smart planning. I think the missing step here is, as soon as you're engaging the public and all of a sudden they actually know more about the process than us, it gets a bit embarrassing actually. So I don't know if there's a change in policy that needs to happen, but if there's a step there where the public are being engaged or dealt with and we're not aware of it, to me, that's where it's falling over.
If I can, look, Councillor Campbell, I think you're right, and that's fine. We don't need to change a policy or anything like that. We just need to be, as the Mayor said, make sure we acknowledge and include elected members in work like this where we involve the public.
So if we can just be very clear with these action steps, Mr. Marith, if we can have all of that information that's preceded this process, so this pre-engagement information, what questions were asked of who, and all of the information that was given to the consultant about what they were being asked to do when they were engaged, then we'll be in a position to understand where we're headed.
Sure.
Okay. Secondly, in terms of the answers around moving budgets, we have been told that council staff have got delegated authority to move $50,000 from the work that we had asked to have done in Earlidge Park into one of these programs of work. So what I'd like you to do is come back to us with, let's have a look at those delegations, because I don't think we want to necessarily be moving that money from Earlidge Park without knowing about it. We should have known about it, even if you did have delegation. And we still don't understand what's happened with that feasibility study. I've asked lots of times, it just seems to not be happening. There's been in the past, like we don't have a staff member to run a procurement process to engage a consultant to do it. That's the last I heard about it.
I just updated you on that before, Mr. Mayor. It's coming to the March briefing.
Well, it might be in the March briefing.
And through the chair also, Sue or GC, someone from finance, will report via the exceptions report any capital or OPEX move changes. So they would have reported that at some point through council as well. So we would never move money and not communicate that to council. There is a clear process around that. That's why we have delegated financial authority limits and then clear reporting lines on how we get that information back to council. So there's a monthly report that comes into every council meeting.
Except that council is receiving hundreds and hundreds of pages of reporting every month. And so to say you've done something and we should know about it because it was reported, and that amongst all of the regional committees and all the regional working groups as well, to pick one thing out is a bit unlikely to be stumbled across.
Is there actually a separate table for those movements? Is it actually split out from the?
Yeah, so historically, GC has pulled out those changes. We would have had to move them. So there have been specific line items that she's spoken to. So she takes the reporter to read and then she just points out any of those changes. So it's like we heard it if it had been brought up at the meetings, but I don't recall it coming up at a meeting. So, yeah.
Yeah, just on these action points, the third thing is we've had this conversation today about how an open spaces strategy isn't a plan or a policy of the council. I think we need to determine that it is. because we need to have elected member control over it, we were told it was entirely operational. I don't know whether we've resolved in that position or not, but that needs to be documented. If we're going to go and do a major piece of work like this, I don't care what town it's in, could be anywhere in the district or a whole district thing, we need to be involved in that process.
And as I said before, Mr Mayor, I agree, and we'll do that.
Councillor Lambert.
Just one little question, and excuse my ignorance, there, I'm not very familiar with it. But that second picture on the bottom row there, is that actually existing? Has that work been done?
Alamar Crescent car park.
And that's
the one that we just.
Yeah, that was the one with the mitten in there and everything else, wasn't it? Cool, thank you.
Right, any other questions?
Clarify something you said about the road and there was 600K. What was that set aside for? Was that for Alamar Crescent?
Alamar Crescent Olsen Ave realignment, capital funding of $600,000 to be delivered. Yeah.
So when you say realignment, is this to do with that the thoroughfare at the back of the?
You would have to ask someone from the roading team what this roading project was about. I'm not across roading at all. Sorry.
Yeah, just when you said Olsen Ave, just didn't.
Get some clarity around that too as a fourth action point then, please.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. All right, are there any other questions or comments on this item?
It's a very quick one.
Yes.
I take it the consultants were aware of the campground and their flexibility around the outfits or doing trade and moving stuff around?
Yeah, so it was identified through the interviews. So we made contact with the campground and then they had conversations and they presented those as options, and those weren't new. Our commercial manager had also heard of some flexibility that they hope to desire as well. Hope to get here.
Well, thank you very much, and that was a good presentation. Thank you for bringing us up to speed. All right. Next we have pensioner housing with Glynis McCarthy. Welcome, Glynis.
Your Worship, I take it that the paper has been read. I'll just give you a very quick overview of the paper and any pertinent points. We're talking today about our pensioner housing portfolio. We have 58 one-bedroom units across Mangawhai, Rurawai and Dargaville. The bulk of those are in Rurawai and Dargaville. As you know, we're just about we've completed the work on site in Mangawhai at Fagan Place. That was opened just before Christmas, and we have all of our tenants now who have moved into there. The aim of our portfolio is to provide safe, affordable housing for older residents of limited means across our district, and it directly supports our LTP outcome of local accommodation for elderly community members. Our current delivery, as I said, we're in Rurawai and in Dargaville, where the bulk of our units are. That's currently managed by DCDB. They've had a rolling contract since 2018. The rent that's taken for those units, one-bedroom units, is $170 a week, and they've had 99% occupancy between 24-25, and in fact have had very, very high occupancy throughout the entire time that they've managed that program. We have an existing funding agreement with what was Housing New Zealand, now Kāinga Ora. That is in place until 2027. It was a 20-year program where we borrowed $1 million specifically for the upgrade of those units in Rurawai and Dargaville. As I said, in Mangawhai, those are managed in-house by council staff. We've got 14 units. We currently have 13 of those occupied, and we do have one vacancy. And the rent there is $190 for existing tenants who have transferred from the older units, and then $255 per unit for new tenants. The key issues and considerations for this paper is looking at potentially the different type of management and rent models across our portfolio. We do currently have an expired external contract with DCDB. They've been rolling over month to month. They do look after our tenants, as I said, in Rurawai and Dargaville, and they manage the day-to-day operations and past repair and tenancy matters with those tenants. As I've already said, we've got some legal constraints on some of those units for Dargaville and Rurawai for 2027. The contingent of the loan is that we continue to provide that as pension housing for that length of time. We have a vacancy at the moment in Rurawai requiring some direction. And obviously we're looking to make sure that we are financially sustainable in whatever delivery model that we look at, that we've got consistent delivery models across the district, and we've got a good alignment with community expectations. So from today's paper, I'm seeking direction from elected members on the future management and the delivery of council's pensioner housing portfolio. We are mandated under the LTP to do a service review. I'm expecting that will take approximately 2 months, and money has been budgeted through the LTP for that exercise. And that review will look to assess the options, including whether or not we are fulfilling our requirements to make sure that they're cost neutral, but look at considerations about whether or not we should be providing in-house delivery, whether we should look at identifying perhaps a community housing provider, or look at using a third-party delivery model. And once that review is done, then those findings would be reported back to council for your conversations and deliberations and decisions.
Wonderful. That was an excellently concise presentation. Appreciate it. And I think it's important that if we're doing a Section 17A review, I think it's important that we just remain with the status quo in terms of all of our units until we get out the other side of that. That would be the approach that I would prefer. Let's make sure we know what we've got, what our obligations are before we go taking on anything further. Councillor Lambert.
Yeah, just got a couple of questions here. The Dargaville Rurawai units, month on month, or I thought it was year by year?
So once the contract expired in 2018, actually it just went to a month by month. I brought a paper last year in December. DCDB would like to have a year contract. And in that time, we have been trying to do a Section 17A review. It was coming up in the July, but because of staffing constraints, I haven't got to it, but it is now top of mind and something that I will do very quickly and get onto that.
Right. The stats you gave with the Dargaville one there, I believe it's only a small percentage which actually goes to the running of it. Most of it's maintenance, or it comes back to the council. But a 99% occupancy rate, you're going to find somebody hard to beat that, aren't you?
Absolutely. Certainly, we have a very big waiting list for Mangawhai. I think that across the district, there are a number of people that would qualify and would like to move into pensioner housing.
I'm just talking about the Dargaville ones here at the moment, because that was a stat you gave. I haven't mentioned Mangawhai yet. Sorry. Oh. So that was that occupancy, $170 a week, 99% occupancy rate. Yeah. The Mangawhai unit, now that brings up another thing. I might have got things wrong here, but I thought the original plan was for the Mangawhai units that it was going to be a shrinking lid on it as far as occupancy goes, and that's why we went for transportable units.
So you are wrong. There has been no formal decision in that space. There was informal direction provided that could be the way that it gets dealt with, but there has been no decision made. Okay. It does. But that's why we're coming to you now. So what we've heard, I just want to clarify this, because we do look across the board here, And we do have measures in our LTP that we must deliver to. So to the point of the last item about informing you and getting your direction, there is a wait list, there is a demand for these units. Now, if we pause on filling them, then until the outcome of the Section 17A review, that is a period of some months, and I think that's appropriate. However, you're going to have to realise that in the annual report, we may not meet our measures because we're not filling the vacancies and they'll be left empty. So you just need to be very clear that that is the outcome of the direction we're seeking today. Well, what the direction you're providing us today.
Was there a waiting list for the old units in Mangawhai?
Yes, there was.
There was. Oh, okay.
Really are no one-bedroom units available throughout the district. It's not something that's, very much prevalent within the housing plan.
Councillor Nathan.
Kia ora, I did read over the other report too, and I noticed that DCDB received 75% of the running costs. So what I'd like to know is how many units do we have in Dargaville and Rolla?
So we have 44.
So there are 44 at 170 per week, and they receive 75%.
Well, they return to council.
Sorry, that's all. Wasn't
Yeah, so they return to council.
Sorry, I think, they're doing pretty good. Management.
Yeah.
I'm in the wrong industry.
So they return to council $72,256 per year.
So there's quite a few units that we have, because obviously we have a shortage of pensioner housing in Dargaville and Rawai, to the extent where we have a lot of kaumatua in really not so good situations. So what I would obviously like to, I just wanted to make that comment, and I just needed clarity on that. I wasn't sure 75% was actually going to them to manage those units, but as you're saying, that comes back into our kiti, into our towns.
That's right. So they look after the day-to-day operations, and we look after the capital expenditure. So as you can appreciate, after 20 years of being maintained, from our previous injection, they are getting to a point where we now need to put quite a bit of maintenance in. I do know that we need to do work in Rural, and I know that we need to do some work to do with ensuring that we maintain our healthy home status. Through time and wind and movement, I know that some of the insulation in some of the units has shifted, and so we're going to need to put some money back into those units. That is outside of what DCDB manage. That is something that KBC at the moment has to manage.
Right, Councillor Jepson and then Councillor Canton.
I think some of the stuff we're discussing here should actually be publicly excluded at some point in commercial arrangements. A question I would have to say, I guess, maybe this could be excluded environment too, but have we had reliable service from our housing provider manager, DCDB? They've been a reliable.
Yes, they have, absolutely. And they have, we've done with Mangawhai, we've always had exceeding demand versus supply. So we've always had very high occupancy rates, both for Mangawhai and for Dargaville and Rurawai.
So DCDB have been reliable managers for how long,
Their contract came up for renewal in 2018. I'm sorry, I don't actually have it in front of me when we started that.
Considerable amount of time.
It has been a very long time, that's right.
Right, thank you.
So we've got Councillor Canton, then Councillor Szymanski, and then Councillor Lambert.
Your Worship. Sorry, I'm harping on about your question. I just want to get this right because I read this slightly differently.
So do I.
There's 44.
Oh.
There are 44 units at $170 a week.
That's right.
And DCDB retains 72% of rental revenue in return for providing management services.
That's correct.
So 44 units at 170 a week is 7,480 a week. We times that by 0.72, we get to $5,385 in management charges per week, which times by 52 weeks of the year is $280,000. I mean, I don't know. I just, is there something special about these units compared to general residential rental where they average or the usual management charge from managing a residential rental house or unit is 8%.
Sure. I agree with your statement. The original contract that we had with DCDB was that they would provide $80,000 less GST, which is $72,256 a calendar year. When I go back and look at, and I think that I've taken the point of Councillor Jepson, I seek advice from Jason.
Well, we don't want to talk about commercial sensitivities in the open environment if there is commercial sensitivities, okay?
I suspect that's where we're heading.
We would have to probably pause that. We've got to respect the commercial arrangement we have with DCDB. They have been a good provider for some time for us. But it is, sorry, Mr. Chair, but it is entirely appropriate. In fact, it's overdue to do a Section 17A review on this. It's also exacerbated somewhat because we have new units in Mangawhai as well. And we do need to look at holistically the whole picture, so Mangawhai, Rurawai and Dargaville, and make sure we've got a good delivery model that is good for the ratepayers, that is delivering for the tenants, and then obviously your long-term strategy as a council.
Thank you. As a chairman, take a bit of liberty here, because what we've actually done is we've probably given a bit of a twisted view on it. I've done some research on it, and I've found that the 72% that is held by DCDB, 52% of that is spent on maintenance solely on the units. So it's not a big money-making venture. They only hold 20% for the admin and administering it and putting people in and monitoring it. That is my belief. So we need to, and we've got to bear in mind that these units are old and require a lot more maintenance. And we'll leave it at that without going into numbers. I just wanted to clear that up because we may have given a false impression for the people who are listening.
Yeah.
Thank you. I might have taken a bit of liberty there. Right, well, the other question we had, Mr. Szymanski, you had a question.
You may have to use your laptop, Councillor Szymanski, to unmute. Might be easier.
Can you hear me there?
Yep, you're good.
Yep. Yeah, so just going over exactly what Councillor Kenton brought up there with the amount per year and how much DCB is going, and yeah, understand that it needs to be sort of mindfully talked about. Now also the 20% on admin and 50% on maintenance, but then if that much maintenance is actually getting done, then how come the buildings are getting older and all of a sudden extra costs having to go through? I think that definitely has to be all looked at and gone through and probably reviewed going forward, especially now with the new units. And yeah, looked at properly, especially as a renting contractor.
And that's exactly what we're going to do. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
One last question before we wrap this up.
I was just need feedback. I think it's really important to do the S17 role.
Yes.
And I think we do that first. We find out all these questions and things that we need to have answered within that, and then we can look at the bigger picture after that, I think.
Okay, and on that,
it's really important.
Can I just wrap it up there then maybe, if I can, Mr. Chair? So the direction we're getting from you is we proceed with a 17A review as per the legislation to identify the best delivery model and work through all the detail that we've talked about now. Do we release, so when we have vacancies in all of our units, do we fill them or do we not? Remembering what we said, that whilst we go through the 17A review, it's possibly a 3 month.
I'd say 2 months, 2 to 3 months.
2 to 3 month process. So just need direction here.
I've already given direction on that, but let's hear some other feedback. I think that let's just leave it with the status quo, and you're just talking about a reporting percentage in the annual report. You've made us aware that it's there. It's just a technical matter. It doesn't matter. We need to make sure we get everything right. And so I say everything on hold, get through the Section 17A review, make sure we've got all our facts straight, and then we set our path forward from there. feedback, but I'm happy to hear from anyone else as well.
No, I support that.
Okay. Good. Right.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you. All right, that brings us to the end of our council briefing. So we will